I'll find out. I'll find out.
Good evening and welcome to the December 12th meeting of the Orange County Board of Commissioners here at the Southern Human Services Center in Chapel Hill. Good crowd tonight, which is always encouraging on this night that is getting colder. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda that anyone has? All right, and just so you know, there's some items at your places. There's a revised item 4D, the Bill of Rights Proclamation. There's a PowerPoint for item 6E, which is the Go Triangle presentation. There is a handout to go with the item 4E, which is our annual financial report. And then there are some information items. There's a PowerPoint for item 6C on Land's Legacy. And then there are some information items, one from Commissioner Jacobs on agriculture and food initiatives, and one from our colleagues in Durham County regarding K-3 class size reduction. All right. We will then proceed to the public comments section of the meeting. We divide the public comments up into two parts. First, at this point in the meeting, we will hear comments on items that are not on the printed agenda. And then if you are here to speak to an item that is on the printed agenda, we will call for those comments when we get to that item on the agenda. And if you are here to speak to an item that's on the printed agenda, and please make sure you sign, there are sign-up sheets in the back where you can sign up and identify which item you're here to speak to. All right, we have two folks signed up to speak to items that are not on the agenda. First up is Robin Jacobs.
Hello, I'm Robin Jacobs. I'm the Executive Director of the Eno River Association, which you probably all know by now. I'm here to say happy holidays to all of you, greetings from the Eno River Association, and to bring you calendars, the 2018 Eno River Association calendar. This year it is inspirations on the Eno. It's paintings, photographs, poems, songs, and I think it's a really special calendar. I always like to come and speak to you, say hello, because we value so much the partnership that we have with Orange County. We are about to close, before the end of the year, a land protection project that will expand our Confluence Natural Area and protect water quality in the Eno, which is drinking water for Hillsborough, Durham, and Falls Lake. And that's a partnership with you. It's the third partnership property that we've closed this year, and we have several more in the works. It's especially exciting to be here tonight when you're going to be talking about Land's Legacy, because it really is a legacy for Orange County. Two of the projects that we've closed this year, including the one we're about to, the property's been in the same family for over 100 years, and those properties will stay in the condition that they are now, and some of them will be open to the public so that they can walk on the trails, enjoy it. Anyway, we really value it. We value what you do and appreciate it, and happy holidays.
Thank you so much. We appreciate everything that you all do and the preservation efforts that you are making and the collaboration with the county.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
No favoritism there.
And especially timely, not just because of the calendars, but we are going to be talking about the Land's Legacy program a little later in the meeting. So, yeah, Commissioner
Mr. Chairman, if I might, Ms. Jacobs, could you speak to where the general public could get these calendars?
It is a fundraiser for the Eno River Association, helps us protect land. But they're available at a number of stores, several in Hillsborough and several in Chapel Hill. On our website, enoriver.org, you can find a list of them. In Hillsborough, they're available at Dual Supply, Grossmart, and Weaver Street. And in Chapel Hill, you can get them at Flyleaf Books, Great Outdoor Provision Company, the Wild Bird Store, a couple other places.
Thank you. I'd encourage the general public, if they want a really unique and interesting calendar, this is the one they ought to get.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have also signed up to speak is Ed Johnson.
I'm actually speaking on the MST issue, and I'll save my remarks until then.
All right, thank you. All right, then we also had Alan Green is signed up to speak. Do we have the MST issue on the agenda at some point today?
I would like to do the same thing if that's permitted.
Sure, I'm just trying to, I'm just looking at where.
There's an information item regarding the MST.
Yeah, so we're not actually, we don't have it as a specific agenda item, so now would be the time to speak.
Excuse me, I just got informed by this gentleman over here that the MST agenda item on the back page is informational, and that if we wanted to make a remark, we had to do it now. Alan, why don't you start?
Okay.
Chairman Dorson and distinguished commissioners, I'm back with a request that our petition submitted last week asked that you would consider establishing the route for the MST tonight. And Director Stansel gave you a response that recommended a delay of another 6 months. It'll work out that way if it's simultaneous with the budget and the capital improvement plan for the county. And we've been here many times over the last 2 years. One of the reasons the state, in their master plan, assigned Orange County a low priority was that they felt that there was not commitment. And Commissioner McKee at the time wrote a letter to the state saying, yes, we are committed. We are going to move forward with this. Well, that was 2 years ago. And tonight we have an opportunity to establish the route. Everybody knows pretty much what the route is going to be. And we can get moving with negotiations with other segments, the Owasso segment and the 7 Mile Creek segment. We can begin negotiations with property owners like Ed Johnson who are willing to give easements. All we need is your consent, approval, confirmation, affirmation that the route through Orange County is going to run from Saxapaw up Bethlehem Church Road to the Owasso property, then on to Hillsborough on one of the road routes available, and into the 7 Mile Creek area. And we would like to see that established tonight. And it's been long enough. And many of you have been part of this journey, and we hope that we can establish that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, did you want to make some comments now?
What I want to say is just very short and simple. I'm an old-time hiker. I've hiked many of the segments of the AT in North Carolina, and the people I have met on the trail, excuse me, have been great people. I've never seen any troublemakers. I own land just to the north of the Cane Creek Reservoir, and I am willing to grant an easement for the MST to cross my land along the creek. Now, as you can see by looking at me, I'm getting on in years. And I just wanted to say that I hope to live to see hikers on the MST coming across my land. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to note for folks here or watching at home, what the information item that we received that the manager referred to, regarding the petition from last week, recommends that, as was noted, that the trail route be approved concurrent with our budget discussions this spring, at which time there'll be recommendations on timing and phasing. As, on the requests about accepting offered easements, like Mr. Johnson's, it's, the information item says that staff has been in touch with several landowners in this area, and that we're moving forward with that, but completion by February 2018 may be too ambitious, given the needed legal and staff review that will be required. And as to item 3 from the petition, which requested establishing a relationship with the Friends of the MST, the information item states that this is underway, that the staff and the executive director of the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail met last week. A draft MOU is being worked on regarding trail building and assistance. And then so that's in the process and will require legal review. And then as soon as we have that, we'll have an approval schedule. So just to share that, I don't know, Manager Hammersley, do you want to add anything to that?
I was going to point out that that was in your information packet when we got to the manager's report. What I was going to point out was that we are, what the information said was we were going to proceed as we have been phase by phase through the capital improvement plan, but if there was a desire to do it differently, we would request that from the board to give us direction on how you want us to proceed. But right now, as the director Stansel indicated, we are having contact with landowners, we are having contact with the Friends of the Mountains to Sea Trail, and we are moving forward at a pace that is quicker than what had been anticipated, because there was a time when Millhouse Road Park was the priority, but we put the Mountains of Sea Trail forward last year to move forward with that. So we can certainly respond to whatever this board would like us to do, but we do plan to have a discussion during the budget process as well on the next phase of the trail.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Jacobs?
Regardless of what the timetable is, and I respect staff wanting to do things in a systematic and careful manner, I don't think people should take the fact that we are moving at that speed to be any lessening of our commitment to making this happen. It just may not happen at the same rate that members of the public would wish we would do it, but I haven't heard any discussion of our retreating from completing the project.
Commissioner McKee?
To reiterate, the letter that was sent a couple of years ago expressing this board's support for this when I was chair, I agree with Commissioner Jacobs. There has been no backing away from that commitment. It is a time-consuming process. From my position, anyone who wishes to make donations of easements or any other aid toward this endeavor, it will work with the staff. I see no reason that cannot start forward.
Commissioner Markopoulos, and then Commissioner Price.
So we're contacting landowners. That seems somewhat of a tacit acceptance of at least parts of the trail. Is that correct? I mean, if we're actually contacting landowners, there's a large part of the trail that we have essentially said we're going to do.
Right.
I wonder how much of the trail we've seen in that way.
Yes, based on this, let me reference back a couple of meetings. September 19th, presentation to the board, there was direction provided that night. We'd sent a memo confirming what we thought was your direction on October 27th, which included what you just mentioned, which is beginning to act on situations where we know there are interested landowners. And then I think that the memo and the information item kind of just reinforces that concept. So we sent some information out to folk. There are a number of folks who have contacted us or we've been made aware of. We've sent information out, and we are prepared to begin talking about easements and other amenities in those locations. And we anticipate, just in terms of the timing, we anticipate that happening in fairly short order. So when the memo says we're not sure that we can be done by February, that may mean it might be March or it might be April. We're not saying we're going to delay it for 6 months. It's just that with legal review and other reviews that need to take place on the easements, we didn't want to lock ourselves in to a date that couldn't be accomplished.
Commissioner Price?
Yes, I just wanted to reinforce what's been said. And just as a reminder that I had asked last week, that for those landowners who have volunteered to come forward and to donate their land, that, rather than stall and delay, that we try to at least be in contact with them and begin to get the ball rolling, because I think just as with any project, if people see some progress, there's more assurance that it's going to happen rather than just having it on paper. Now, I'm not saying that in no way says that I expect you to sign all the papers by the end of the year, 2017, but if we could at least have something that shows that we are moving forward.
Well, without getting into much detail, every one of the property owners, including a couple that haven't been identified yet, should have received something late last week or early this week that would initiate that process, and the next step would be to begin finalizing it. So I think we've taken that initial step.
May I ask Mr. Stansel a question?
Of course.
One of the concerns that proponents have is that we're not actually identifying a path for the trail. What are we not completing, or have we not completed, that's preventing us from identifying where the trail is going to go?
Well, the only thing that made us recommend that we time it up with the CIP is that our capital investment plan for the last several years has broken this into 3 phases. And we have already had conversations about the potential for revisiting how those phases work, how the timing works, and how the funding would work for those segments, and maybe in some cases changing the order a bit. So because of that, and because we typically tend to do a lot of these things concurrent with the CIP, we decided to recommend that would be one way to do that. So you would see that in March or April, as I recall, and then there would be an opportunity at that time to go ahead and set the route. But is there anything that precludes you from being able to set a line on a map right now? No, as indicated in the previous 2 memos, we've identified a proposed route at this point, and we're prepared to move forward with that. But our normal practice would be to take care of that consistent with the CIP.
If I might. Please. But we've also, in the past, when we were doing park planning, had a conceptual plan that the Board of Commissioners adopted before it went into the CIP, before we adopted the master plan itself. So would it not be consistent with past practice to have the commissioners come back and adopt a conceptual plan for where the trail's going to go before we get to the exact details and the funding?
We can certainly do that. We could bring that back before the CIP so that we have that. So we can bring that in the end of January or early February.
I'm sure it'll give some people more anxiety, but I think for a lot of the people who have come to us to ask us recently how we could expedite this or show our tangible support, that might be a good interim step. So I at least would hope we would do that at our first meeting in January.
Yeah, let's put that up, try to get that on the agenda for the 23rd, and then we'll have at least that conceptual framework. I appreciate that, Commissioner Jacobs. I think that's a good solution. Any other comments on this item? All right, thank you, Mr. Stansel, and thank you, gentlemen, for your input. Those are all the people signed up to speak to items not on the agenda. So next up are announcements, petitions, comments by board members. 3-minute limit per commissioner. Commissioner Markopoulos.
Yesterday was the quarterly meeting of the Family Success Alliance, and one of the presentations was on the new website and an effort to spread the word on the Family Success Alliance, with the idea that the more people know about it, the more success it would likely have. And so I would ask that everyone here who wonders what the Family Success Alliance is, go check them out on Facebook and Twitter and follow them, and then share what you find that you like. And during that meeting, Sheriff Blackwood was there, and he wanted to share what SALT has done, which is Sheriff Seniors and Law Enforcement Together. It's a program where some sheriff's officers and other folks try and meet the individual needs of folks in the community. They build ramps for the handicapped, they bring food to people, they repair holes in roofs, and he left this really long list of everything that they had done in October, and I just, grabbed it, took it home, thought I'd check it out, and the more I read it, the more impressed I was that this was going on in our community. So I wanted to recognize SALT for all that they've been doing. I put a list in front of everyone here so you could check it out and see what I'm talking about. And then it also sort of dovetailed in with some conversations that we had at the meeting, conversations I've been having with people lately. It's like so many things happen in this community that we don't know about. And part of that is we live in a brand new media environment that's less available to people. The news is less available to people than it ever has been, with the decline of newspapers and the fact that you have to know where to look on the internet to see what's going on. And I think we had this last election, the municipal election that we had, was the first in this new era of sort of restricted, downgraded news. And so I just raised that issue and just, just asked the question, what can we do to provide a new framework where people have access to information so that we can, be better citizens and make the right decisions. I don't know the answer, but I encourage everybody to think about it and come up with ideas, and us as well, maybe at some point address that issue.
Commissioner Price?
Yeah, I have a few. First, I attended the NACO, National Association of Counties, Poverty Summit and Board of Directors fall meeting, and part of that event included an explanation and tour of a facility they call One Safe Place. And this, by the way, is in Fort Worth, Texas. And it was quite impressive that they included all kinds of wraparound services for families in need, and especially for young children. And although they don't provide sleeping areas for people, it is a safe haven for people to come to any time of day. 24 hours, it's open 24 hours that someone can come in. And part of their philosophy, as was a philosophy at the Stepping Up Peer Exchange that I also attended the week before, they have a no wrong door policy, and I hope that's something that we can adopt throughout our departments here, that if someone comes to a department or makes a phone call, that, rather than say, oh, this is the wrong department, or we don't do this, that we do try to provide them with some services. So again, no wrong door. In addition, for those of you that have been following Cardinal Innovations, the Board of Directors meeting is going to be on Thursday, and the State Association is assisting with that process. And then finally, while I was at the Poverty Summit and Board of Directors meeting, Mecklenburg County Commissioner told again how Mecklenburg has been hit with these cyber attacks, and asked where they had to pay a ransom in order to get their data. And asked, it was Commissioner Dunlap, asked that NACO, specifically the Telecommunications and Technology Steering Committee, get involved. So NACO may be shifting, well, not maybe, they intend to shift their gears to address that, because they realize that more counties than just Mecklenburg have been hit with these cyber attacks, and with some legal ramifications. And so just FYI.
Thank you. Commissioner McKee?
Yes, I had the opportunity last night to attend the swearing-in ceremony for the elect folks in Hillsboro's board. Kathleen Ferguson, Jen Weaver were reelected and sworn in as returning commissioners, and the mayor, Tom Stevens, was sworn in as a returning mayor. It was a very nice ceremony. I enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the festivities for Carborough and Chapel Hill, but I would like to congratulate those new and returning members for those boards, as well as thank the members from both of those boards that, for whatever reasons, are not returning to those boards.
Thank you. Commissioner Rich.
Commissioner Dorson and I covered Chapel Hill and Carborough, so we had commissioners there. Both congratulations to all those new board members.
I was there too.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Were you at both of them? You just Carborough, yeah. So we were all Carborough.
Thank you.
two
I
of
think
us
it's
at the-
critical that we
Yeah.
congratulate and communicate with our fellow elected
Yeah,
officials.
I didn't make it to the school board. I don't know if anyone did. But Joel Hall Brown is getting sworn in on the 19th. She had a death in the family, couldn't get sworn in with her fellow colleagues. So if anyone wants to attend that, I'm going to try to get to that. Just one thing, I went to the Triangle J meeting last week when we talked about preservation of farmland and just land in general, since we're talking about that tonight as well. And I was really excited to see how many farms that still exist in Orange County. And Orange County and Chatham County, out of most of the Triangle J area, are the only areas that are actually adding farms. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that we are still adding farms, as opposed to Durham and Wake that are just, farms are just shutting down daily. So it's good, we're doing it right, and I just want to encourage everyone to keep doing it. The farm easements are really important, and we've got a great program going. We talked about that, and the foodways, and that segues into what Commissioner Jacobs did yesterday, but it all ties together regionally, and we're on the top of our region for preserving farmland. So thanks to the farmers out there.
Commissioner Jacobs.
A few, one is I'd like to see if we can get some updates as the process goes on for the discussions between our staff and the Chapel Hill Carborough school system staff on value engineering, or at least reappraisal of the Chapel Hill High project, which we discussed, and just so that we can
When is the meeting?
be up to speed as those discussions move forward, because I know there's a deadline in April for when they get their bids.
There is a meeting scheduled, I think it's next week, for the teams to come together and talk about, the collaboration team to come together and talk about that. So we will get information as those occur to the board.
Great, since we'll be not meeting for 6
Right,
or 7 weeks.
right, yeah.
Thank you. Also, I had mentioned, I think it was when we were talking about the academy, the government academy, and I didn't know, I thought I'd just go ahead and make it a petition that we reinstitute a county government day in April, which is County Government Month. We used to do that. We have a member of staff who's now working in social services who orchestrated that, and it was for high school students to spend the day shadowing a department head of their choice, and then they sat here and acted as county commissioners and solved all of the problems of the county in about half an hour. It was,
Cool.
it was very inspiring. So I hope we can do that again. Also, as was mentioned, there was a meeting yesterday, probably about 24 people, that Commissioner Hutchinson, Commissioner Carter, and I put together, or at least instigated, and we had 5 staff people there, or 4 and me. We were outnumbered, but we more than made up for it. And it was a very productive and encouraging meeting. There were a lot of people who were not from government, but there were a lot of people from Cooperative Extension and Soil and Water. And there's tremendous amount of energy in all of these different organizations to try and promote things related to food security, food safety, farmland preservation, having a more inclusive food system, getting food into institutions as opposed local food. And what we agreed was essentially to have staff work together to try and look at the opportunities we have to not keep duplicating each other, but to try and figure out ways to partner on some issues that we can do together. And then once we have some kind of framework, invite surrounding counties and see if we can't come up with a way to move forward in this region and have more of a unified legislative agenda to remove some of the barriers and to support local agriculture. And then finally, this sometimes doesn't happen, or I wanted to just make sure that, at least for myself, I want to, since this is the end of our calendar year, to thank the Orange County staff for all the work that they've done for the residents of Orange County and for the Board of County Commissioners. We don't take the staff for granted, but we probably don't say enough how proud we are of our staff and how good a job they do and how we commend their efforts to the residents of the county.
Thank you. That's well said. Yeah. And Commissioner Burrows.
So while we're waiting to hear what happens in the Alabama Senate race tonight, I have a little bit of local electoral news that I want to share. I have decided that I will not file to run for re-election. I have an amazing day job with a wonderful international nonprofit called iPass. It's based in Chapel Hill. And I've been grateful that the voters gave me a chance to do this also often rewarding, sometimes aggravating night gig. But it's time for me to share. And so I will not run, and I will look forward to watching the race as it goes forward. And because I'm a modern elected official, I will be posting a statement on Facebook explaining in far more detail what my thinking was.
Well, that, I guess that I have nothing to say to, I have nothing. I kind of brought down the mic drop. So, well, we will have you at least for another year, which I appreciate, and certainly appreciate all that you've brought to the board so far. I think you've been really an invaluable asset to the collective here and to the community, so.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
So now you can vote without any fear of electoral retribution. We can see the real Commissioner Burrows now.
Excellent.
All right, very good. Excellent. All right, we'll move on then to item 4, proclamations, resolutions, and special presentations. And you see it's the night of 1,000 proclamations. So first up, item 4A is a proclamation recognizing the Chapel Hill High School women's cross-country team winning the 2017 state championships. And our communications director, Todd McGee, will MC the event.
Thank you, Chairman Dorsand. We have several teams we're going to honor tonight. I think everybody knows that Orange County has a very proud athletic tradition from that university a couple of roads down couple of miles south down the road. As an NC State fan, I'm not allowed to say their name, but we know who they are. But we also have a great tradition and winning of teams in our high schools. And tonight we have 3 teams that won state championships this fall that we would like to recognize. As you said, the women's cross-country team from Chapel Hill, I believe they qualify as a dynasty. This is their 3rd straight state championship and their 12th overall. And so we have Coach Mabe here tonight and several of her runners, so I'm going to let her bring them up and introduce them, and then one of y'all can read the proclamation, and we'll get some photographs. So, Coach Mabe.
Thank you for inviting us here to be honored. I would like to introduce you to my team, but first I want to say I'm excited about the Mountains to Sea Trail. Dave and I just ran the race across Durham last week on the Mountains to Sea Trail, and it's glorious to run all along the Eno River, so I'm excited y'all are totally on board with that. So first, I'd like to introduce my assistant coach, Dave Mabe, my husband. And behind me, I have Captain Madeline Montcours, Anna Stauffer, Captain and state runner-up individually, Catherine Nagoleon, Grace Tate, senior, Mia Hoover, another senior, and Captain Maddie Marvin, Lena Cohen, another captain, and our junior representatives, Maggie Springer, Lily Crook, and our fan and loyal sister, Megan Marvin, in the audience. So thank you again for having us here.
Good job. Good job.
Hey, if you want to read this one, please?
Sure. Orange County Board of Commissioners proclamation of recognition on Chapel Hill High School winning the 2017 state championship in women's cross country. Whereas on November 4th, 2017, the Chapel Hill High School women's cross country team won the North Carolina High School Athletic Association 3A state championship. And whereas under the guidance of Coach Joan Nesbitt Mabe, the team won its 12th state championship and its third consecutive title. And whereas through hard work, dedication, teamwork, and commitment, the team brought honor upon themselves, Chapel Hill High School, the Chapel Hill Carborough City School District in Orange County. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Orange County Board of Commissioners expresses its sincere appreciation and respect for the Chapel Hill High School women's cross-country team and Coach Joan Nesbitt Mabe for their outstanding achievement and their inspiration to youth across North Carolina through their dedication, teamwork, and athletic prowess. This, the 12th day of December 2017, Mark Dorison, Chair.
Want to make that as a
Make that as a motion?
second?
Second. Okay.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0.
Okay.
We're photobombing this picture.
Yeah.
Photobomb. Awesome. Awesome. Get them out of here.
So we do have another team that will be considered a dynasty, but I don't believe anybody from Carborough volleyball team is here. I'm going to check real quick. Anybody? Okay, no, they said their team had a team activity tonight, so they didn't think they'd be able to make it. But the Carborough High team did win its second straight 2A volleyball championship, and they went undefeated. I'll leave it up to you if you want to go ahead and read the proclamation.
Yeah, of course, of course. Commissioner Price, you want to read this one?
Proclamation of recognition on Carborough High School women's volleyball team winning the 2017 state championship. Whereas on November 4, 2017, the Carborough High School women's volleyball team captured the North Carolina High School Athletic Association's 2A state championship. And whereas under the guidance of Coach Steve Skanga, the Carborough High School women's volleyball team earned its second consecutive NCHSAA title. And whereas the Lady Jaguars completed the season with a 31-0 record, extending their winning streak to 61 matches. And whereas the Lady Jaguars brought honor upon themselves, Carborough High School, the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools District, and Orange County, now therefore be it proclaimed that the Orange County Board of Commissioners expresses its sincere appreciation and respect to the Carborough High School women's volleyball team and Coach Steve Skanga for the Jaguars' outstanding achievement and their inspiration to youth across North Carolina through their dedication, teamwork, and athletic prowess. This, the 12th day of December 2017. Signed, Mark Dorison, Chair. And I make a motion that we accept this.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
All right.
the
I will make
right
that,
place.
I will take that to the school. And then finally, we have one more. Chapel Hill High School, again, the men's soccer team came close last year, but this year they climbed the summit and won their 4th state championship in soccer. And so we have Coach Jason Curtis and several members of his team here. And I'll have them come up and let him introduce his players, and then y'all can take it from there.
Thanks for having us. It's great to share the evening with our Chapel Hill team. Good job, ladies, as always. 3 in a row, amazing. We're here with our 3 captains, Matt Arnold, All-Conference, Robert Perard, and Justin Meekum, All-Conference, All-Region, All-State, and All-Mid-Atlantic region. Yes, we came close last year, lost on a, can I say, controversial penalty. And only brought back 2 starters and got back again and got the job done. Can't say how proud we are, and coaching staff and the rest of our 23 players, there's 26 total on the varsity team, and thanks for having us.
All right, I'm going to ask Commissioner Markopoulos to read the proclamation.
Congratulations.
Proclamation of recognition on Chapel Hill High School winning 2017 state title in men's soccer. Whereas on November 18, 2017, the Chapel Hill High School men's soccer team won the North Carolina High School Athletic Association's 3A state championship. And whereas under the guidance of Coach Jason Curtis, the team won its 4th state championship. And whereas through hard work, dedication, teamwork, and commitment, the team brought honor upon themselves, Chapel Hill High School, the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools District, and Orange County. Now therefore it be proclaimed that the Orange County Board of Commissioners expresses its sincere appreciation and respect for the Chapel Hill High School men's soccer team and Coach Curtis for their outstanding achievement and their inspiration to youth across North Carolina through their dedication, teamwork, and athletic prowess this the 12th day of December 2017. I move that we accept this.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the proclamation. All those in favor? Aye. All right. That motion passes 7-0. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Good job.
All right.
All right. More proclamations. I feel like a medieval town crier. The next item is item 4D. It is the proclamation regarding Bill of Rights Day. The board will consider voting to adopt a proclamation to officially recognize Bill of Rights Day in Orange County as December 15th. Authorize the chair to sign. Tara May and our new HRC chair, Dr. Deborah Stroman, are here to make the presentation. Welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. I am the Civil Rights Specialist in the Department of Human Rights and Relations, and I am representing the department tonight in place of the Director, Annette Moore, who is out due to illness. With me is Dr. Deborah Stroman, the current Chair of the Human Relations Commission, and member Joy Pressler, also of the Human Relations Commission. After the Constitution was ratified in 1788, the citizens of the new United States of America were concerned that a centralized government would interfere with states' rights and restrict individual liberties many had fought for and contained within the Declaration of Independence. Citizens within the United States proposed more than 200 amendments to the new Constitution. James Madison, a member of the First Congressional Congress, was charged with reviewing the amendments, and he proposed 19 amendments, 12 of which were approved by Congress and sent to the states for ratification. The states ratified 10 of the amendments on December 15th, 1791. These amendments, called the Bill of Rights, ensured that the government could not restrict those inherent and unalienable rights guaranteed in the Declaration of Independence. Specific limitations on the government included the government could not limit freedom of expression, religion, assembly, and the press, the right to bear arms, not to be a witness against oneself, to due process, a speedy trial, to confront your accuser, trial by jury, and protection against unreasonable search and seizure, and cruel and unusual punishment. And the Bill of Rights has become the cornerstone of our democracy. Throughout the history of the United States, many have fought to preserve, protect, and defend the freedoms guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, and that fight continues today. These freedoms can only continue so long as the people demand them and protect individuals and institutions that dedicate their work to ensuring these rights are applied equally to all. That is why we ask the Board of County Commissioners to proclaim December 15th, 2017 as Bill of Rights Day. Thank you.
All right, so,
Yeah.
would you like to read the proclamation?
Do you want me to do it?
No.
December 15th is my birthday, so I think I should
All
read
right, go ahead.
it. FYI. Whereas on December 15th, 1791, the necessary states ratified the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, called the Bill of Rights, and whereas the Bill of Rights protects every person in the United States of America from the infringement of basic human and civil rights, and whereas it was the North Carolina Convention, held in Hillsborough, which was instrumental regarding the inclusion of a Bill of Rights as part of ratifying the United States Constitution, and whereas the amendments to the Constitution are a safeguard that the county will never succumb, or the country rather, and the county, will never succumb to the tyranny it has fought against, and ensure the principles found in the Constitution will continue to be guaranteed, and whereas those principles of equality, liberty, and justice have been carried forward 226 years as each generation continues to work on perfecting our nation. And whereas the same fundamental belief in the principles of this nation that propelled James Madison to insist on the amendments to the Constitution and must be the same spark that inspires us to defend these principles today. And whereas on the 225th anniversary of the Bill of Rights, former President Barack Obama proclaimed, "If we are to ensure the sacred ideals embodied in the Bill of Rights are afforded to everyone, each generation must do what those who came before them have done and recommit to holding fast to our values and protecting these freedoms. The progress was never inevitable, and as long as people remain willing to fight for justice, we can work to swing open more doors of opportunity and carry forward the vision of liberty and equality for generations to come." And whereas the Orange County Board of County Commissioners is committed to upholding the civil rights and civil liberties of all persons in Orange County and their free exercise and enjoyment of any and all rights and privileges secured by our Constitution and laws of the United States, the state of North Carolina, and Orange County, as they proclaimed on May 20th, 2003 in a resolution regarding the protection of civil rights and civil liberties. Now therefore, do we, the Orange County Board of Commissioners, hereby proclaim December 15th, 2017 as Bill of Rights Day in Orange County and commend this observance to all residents. This, the 12th day of December 2017, signed Mike Dorson, Chair. And I make that as a motion.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded to approve the proclamation. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. That motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Should we pass that to the our friends at the HRC? And if folks are interested, there's a reading on Friday at noon at the Peace and Justice Plaza on Franklin Street of the Bill of Rights as part of the annual celebration.
On behalf of the Human Relations Commission, we wish to acknowledge Commissioner Mark Dorson for his steadfast support and advocacy for low-income and marginalized people of North Carolina. As the former managing attorney of the recently restructured UNC Center for Civil Rights, Mr. Dorson oversaw and coordinated the center's litigation and advocacy agenda. The center's work focused on the most prominent impacts of racial exclusion, including inadequate or substandard housing, targeting of environmental hazards, and discriminatory school district boundaries. In addition, Mr. Dorson taught political and civil rights at UNC Law School. It has been said that in difficult times, in dark times, some people shine. Commissioner Dorson, our community has watched you during these most challenging times. Your light shined. Your commitment, your passion, your humanity. You aligned your words and actions to the spirit of justice. The Commission is grateful for the service of Commissioner Dorison to Orange County. Respectfully, the Human Relations Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for those questions. It means the world to me. I appreciate it. We'll put that up on the wall. All right. That is the end of the proclamations portion of the meeting. Now we have, next up is item 4E, presentation of the draft comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2017. The board will receive the draft comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year. Gary Donaldson and representatives from the county auditors will do the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. So tonight we will be reviewing the comprehensive annual financial report as presented by Maulding and Jenkins. Audit partner James Bentz here. In this audit engagement, just to let you know when Mr. Bentz goes through his presentation, we've expanded the scope even more for cash handling. So we have 15 departments throughout the county that collect cash, and so that is an additional emphasis that you will see in this report. As is the previous tradition, we've received the Government Finance Officers Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting for both the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report and also the Popular Annual Financial Report, which is a more user-friendly document for our residents. So I'd like to recognize members of the Finance Department who are here and have them come forward. Mr. Paul Lawton and Mr. Howard Fitz.
And we have the awards right here. We have, these are beautiful, the award for outstanding achievement in popular annual financial reporting, and the certificate for achievement for excellence in financial reporting. So let me bring these down and present them to you all. I feel like Moses. They're like stone tablets, so congratulations. Thank you. Todd, you want to take a snap?
At this time, I'll have our audit partner, James Bentz, come to give the presentation.
Well, good evening, Chairman and members of the board. My name is James Bentz. I'm the audit service partner for the Orange County Audit Engagement, and I'm going to go over just real briefly the audit results from the June 30, 2017 audit. You'll note on, I think you have before you the comprehensive annual financial report and our, what we call our presentation of the audit results. These are draft. We're expecting them to be finalized in the next couple of days and submitted to the LGC by the end of the week. But primarily what I'm going to go through is our audit presentation. If at any point in time you have any questions, do feel free to jump in. There's a questions tab at the end, but by all means, interrupt me if you have a question. So the first thing I want to point out is, obviously, you guys usually interact with us once a year when we come to do the presentation. So just a little bit of background, this is in your packet of who we are. We're a regional firm that serves about 300 governments throughout the year. Our government practice is the largest niche within our firm, and it's something we do year-round. So we like to pride ourselves on being very familiar with governmental accounting. One thing to point out on slide 3, we as your independent auditors, we come in and we do the audit based on generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. That is to provide, for us to be able to provide a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct as presented. It's not an absolute assurance. We don't test 100% of your transactions, but we do test enough that we can provide a material assurance on that. Through our audit this year, we issued a clean opinion, which is officially called an unmodified opinion, which means that the financial statements as they are before you are materially correct as presented. Along with our audit, we did what we call single audits. You had 2 major programs for the federal awards program and 2 major state programs that we tested, and the opinions include those 2 programs. Through the audit process, we did have a few audit adjustments this year. Those have all been provided to management. They've been incorporated in your financial statements as well as in your accounting general ledger system, and management is in agreement with those adjustments as well. We had a good working relationship again this year with your management team. For those of you who may never have gone through an audit process, most people think it's a pretty painful process. We ask a lot of questions, we get a lot of information, and then we ask more. But we appreciate their work. They did a good job of getting us the information that we needed this year to be able to get in and out. Well, I guess one thing I'll point out on slide 6, I mentioned it earlier, but the financial statements, those are the responsibility of the county. Our responsibility is to audit those financial statements and to issue our opinion. As such, we are independent of the county and of those financial statements and the decisions and estimates involved in them. To go over a little bit of the financial results that kind of typically are more important to you all, I want to look at the general fund budget, or the general fund balance. This is a table that gives you kind of a 5-year trend of what your general fund balance looked like, and we're doing it as a comparison to your annual expenditures of the general fund. I believe the blue is probably kind of the more trigger number that you guys are accustomed to looking at. This represents your unassigned portion of fund balance, which is really what you have available going forward. Your policy is for that to be 16%. At the end of June 30, 2017, it was at 16.8% of your expenditures, and if you include transfers out of the general fund, which are not technically considered expenditures, but obviously are disbursements of a sort, you're still at 16.2% of those numbers. So either way you measure that metric, you're in line with that. One thing that is kind of noteworthy to point out in there that kind of made, as you'll see, the blue actually jump this year, even though total fund balance you can see has gone down. The state stabilization amount, which is that green amount, is a state calculated number, and the key factor that drives that number is your open encumbrances. And one of the things that management did this year is they went back through and did a good job of kind of cleaning up those encumbrances and relieved some of them and kind of narrowed that number down, which allowed your restricted state stabilization amount to drop, which in turn raises your available amount of fund balance.
Can I ask real quick, what's an encumbrance?
So if you have loosely it would be a commitment. So if you have like a purchase order outstanding that you've began purchasing services on something, but you've committed those budget funds, but have not incurred the actual cost yet, that would be an encumbered amount.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. The next couple of slides are going to kind of hit on your primary revenue source for the general fund, which
before you go on to those, I just want to ask a question. Maybe this is for the manager. If you can go back to that last slide.
Yes, sir.
So we went around and around at the budget time about lowering our unassigned fund balance, right? Am I recollecting that right?
Right.
And so, how did we end up with, did we end up going down to 16? Or?
We went to 16 for 17-18 for
Okay.
the new budget, the
Oh, I
budget
see.
we're currently in. So for this, the end of year on June 30th, we were at the policy was 17%.
Gotcha.
So we're just below that 17%, but the new policy for 17-18 will be 16%.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So on the next slide, you'll see what we're showing is the tax revenues on a per capita basis. You can see kind of a good trend of your revenues being pretty consistent throughout the past 5 years. And the second slide gives you kind of a better picture of your property tax revenues. your assessed values have consistently increased, even though as of June 30, 17, you were still within the 8-year assessment window. So all of that increase is growth and new development within the county. Obviously, you guys are aware, January 1, 2017 was your new revaluation, which will then change this slide going forward. But your millage rate has been fairly consistent over the past 5 years. So all growth, or all increase in your taxes is primarily from growth and new developments within the county. The next slide just gives you kind of a very, very high-level snapshot of your general fund, how it operated during the year. So we've got your original appropriations column, the amendments that were made during the year to come to your final approved budget number, and then we've got an actual column for what your final actual numbers were. And kind of the key points to take out of there is you can see revenues came in about 1% over the anticipated amount, and your final appropriation was to use approximately $14 million of your fund balance, but you only ended up needing about 1.7 of that. So the operations during the year, you were able to manage your expenses, and your expenditures came in about $11 million under budget. Your enterprise funds, one of the things we kind of like to do to kind of evaluate how enterprise funds are operating is you can look at the cash flows from operations, and we've got your 3 enterprise funds here, and you'll see your solid waste and then the sewer fund both had negative cash flows from operations. All 3 funds still rely on transfers from the general fund to cover their operating costs and their debt service costs. And then starting on page 12, just want to kind of touch on a few of the findings from the audit. I do want to kind of take a quick minute and just kind of recognize management. Last year's audit, I think we had 7 findings, and this year we're down to 3. They've been doing a good job of kind of implementing the corrective actions and trying to get those reduced and still working to get them eliminated. With audit adjustments, anytime we come in and have to make an adjustment, the standards sort of dictate based on thresholds of those adjustments. If there's anything over a certain threshold, there's no auditor judgment involved. It materially is considered a finding. And so the 2 issues we've got here on this page are year-end closeout related adjustments that deal with the timing of the recognition of expenditures and receivables, mainly dealing with the cutoff of whether you recognize it in FY17 or if it's recognized in FY18. So I don't want you to get to thinking these were never recorded at all. The main issue here is just in which year they're being recognized and reported. And so we had some adjustments related to the expenditures. You'll see the big dollar number there, but I do want to point out out of the expenditures, the main driver of that was there was about $1.2 million of the impact fee change related to the state law this year that were being recognized in FY18, but because the law change was effective in June, they should have been reported in June. So all we did was move those expenditures from your FY18 to FY17, and it's just the timing of that recognition, and that's sort of the premise of the way those adjustments were. Yes, sir.
If I might just make sure that we clarify for anybody that's watching on TV or read something in the paper, this is simply a transfer of this expense that would have occurred in 18 back to 17. It's not, no material monetary difference. It is just an accounting move.
Yes, sir. And then the second bullet, item number 2, is generally the same issue. It was receivables being reported in your fiscal year 18, which were incurred and quote, earned and should have been reported in fiscal year 17. And so we're moving those back a year. Again, still big picture reported in your books, just the period in which they were being reported was incorrect, and our adjustments caused them to move. Item number 3 stems from our single audit testing. Kind of the important takeaway on this one is from a compliance standpoint, everything was occurring as the requirements state. The issue we have is on an internal control standpoint. Internally, the control structure required the person preparing these calculations to sign off on a report, and the signature was missing. It seems minor, but from a control, when we have to evaluate and test controls and there's no documentation, obviously documentation is sort of the key to being testable. And in this situation, we had several missing documentation items. So this is a internal control finding related to the EPICS DSS program. Page 14, as Mr. Donaldson mentioned, this year management asked us to kind of expand our testing outside of the scope of what an audit includes, and we've begun doing a few agreed upon procedures that I think we're going to turn into some annual work. And we're kind of testing different departments. I believe there's 15 departments taking in significant cash, checks, or credit card ACH payments throughout the county, and we're cycling through the various departments just to make sure the controls and the collection process is occurring as it should be. And through that, we met with Register of Deeds, the Sportsplex, and Animal Services during this year, and we went into a little more depth on testing their receipts and their receipting process, kind of verifying segregation of duties and documentation of those segregation. And some of the key highlights, again, we've met with management and gone in very detail over the results and talked about what those mean and how to put in and implement corrective action for those. And the key takeaways here is that we wanted to point out is through the testing, one of the bigger issues that we had was either a lack of segregation of the person being the person who's collecting money, also being the person who's performing the daily reconciliation of cash collections to receipts, or a lack of documentation, so that from our perspective, there's no way to know who does it. Because again, if there's no documentation, you can say what you want, but it's sort of a prove me situation in an audit. And so cash receipting process had a lot of issues in those three departments. We've kind of talked about, again, that that's, from our perspective, something very easy to correct and implement new procedures for. And I think management's working with them to get those implemented. And there was also, all three of these departments use, like most of your departments, they have what we consider subsidiary ledgers. So their receipting process doesn't go through your accounting financial software. They use a separate software for doing that. There was some limitations on their ability to generate sequential lists and account for their use of receipts. And so that's something that, excuse me, in an ideal environment, you're able to do and doing on a periodic basis. And so we've sort of made recommendations and talked to management about working with those software companies to make sure that's something that can be done going forward.
If I might make a comment on that, I appreciate our staff as well as your firm focusing on that, because it's, if there's anything that can get anyone in trouble, it's not having a distinct chain of for lack of a better word, of ownership as this cash moves from receipt to deposit, and very clear protocols in place that the person collecting the money is not the person who's recording the amount, is not the same person that's making the deposit. That puts an extreme burden on individuals to start with, but it also opens a possibility for actions that are not beneficial to the county. So I very much appreciate that.
Thank you. And then the next several pages I won't bore you with, for lack of a better word. The next several pages go into all the new upcoming accounting standards. We put these in here so you have them available. At if any point in time you do have any interest in them, we'll be more than happy to go through them with you in detail. But we do work with management. Obviously, they're the ones that are going to have to implement them. The key for letting you guys know about them is the decisions you make drive how they have to implement things. So we do want you to have the information. But again, the details, we go through and we meet with management to make sure they're aware of things ahead of time so that we're not showing up in an audit and there's some confusion about which standards were applicable which years, because as you'll see, there's about 4 or 5 pages of new standards that the powers that be have created each year. And with that, I'm welcome to any other questions you all may have.
Great, thank you for that presentation. Are there questions for our auditor? I just had one. Could you go back to slide, let's see, it's page, I was going to stop you when you did it, but you were on a roll. Page 9, it's the assessed values versus tax rates slide.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you said about this, and if what you said is what I think you said, I want to emphasize it. You referred to the millerage rate. And what I see here is, so the bottom line is the tax rate.
Yes.
And that shows, this graph shows, at least from 2013 to 2017, our tax rate has stayed pretty flat. We haven't increased taxes.
Correct.
But we have seen an increase in revenue, and that's because we haven't changed the rate, that's due to the result of growth, because we haven't had a revaluation in this chart's time rate.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to emphasize that for everybody who's watching at home or paying attention, is that despite, how much, concern people have about the taxes in Orange County, here's a 5-year period that shows we've kept that tax rate level, and that at the same time we've experienced growth, and that has led to increased revenue. So
Yes.
I just want to emphasize, that important detail is kind of buried in this graph, but I think it's a very important one to emphasize. Commissioner Burrows?
Yes, sir. And if you go back a page, you can see kind of the rate per person isn't spiking at any point. So, and that further solidifies what you're saying.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrows?
Could you take it back to slide 14 for me? Or up to, I guess. So, one more? Page 15. It has the variances on it. Maybe I got the wrong number.
This one? 10?
That's the one, yes. That is
10.
the one I want. So this is actually a question for management. To use a term that we used last spring, did we not sell the cow? This variance is great, that the expenditures were under budget and revenues were a little bit higher. So I'm just kind of curious if you want to take a minute to sort of put that into context. I know it's way early in the year, and we're going to be talking about this much more as we get to budget season, but I'm a little bit curious about that.
So this is for 16-17. One thing that there has been a change over the last few years, if you recall, a couple years ago, this showed our revenues were about 105 to 106%. So we are projecting our revenues much closer than we have been. So we're getting closer. We're only 1% over now. And then we do consistently, this is pretty consistent, that we've been about 95% on expenditures. And so as we look at that, but if you recall, a couple years ago, there was about a 13% swing, because it was like 8% over on under on revenues, and we collected 108 of what we budgeted, and then there was about 95%. So we are looking more closely at what our projection for 17-18 will be, and that again is looking very close, and we're narrowing those margins. And so we'll have, by the time we get to the retreat in January, we'll have a very good idea of what those projections are going to be for 17, and we'll feel pretty comfortable sharing that with the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions or comments?
I have a question for the manager.
Go ahead.
How many entities that are under Orange County's umbrella do their own audit? It says in here that the ABC Board does its own audit.
That's the only one we don't audit.
Okay. Well, can we have a report, please, on whether they follow best practices and periodically rotate their auditor as we do and as most other entities do?
Yes, we can report back on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this item? All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, next up, we have no public hearings tonight, so we're going to move on to the regular agenda. First item on the agenda, item 6A, is consideration of naming the Emergency Service Building the Philip Nick Waters Orange County Emergency Services Center. The board will consider voting to approve a resolution naming the Emergency Service Building at 510 Meadowlands to the Philip Nick Waters Orange County Emergency Services Center. Diana Jeffries will make the presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair Doris and County Manager. We thank you for giving us this opportunity to consider the resolution naming the Emergency Services Building at 510 Meadowlands to the Philip Nick Waters Orange County Emergency Services Center. Nick Waters was very important to us. He was a mentor, he was a leader, he taught us how to survive, and I think we did a pretty good job. We've got an awesome representation of all of those who served beside him, under his leadership, in the audience and around me. Tonight, I'm extremely honored and pleased to have his daughter, Gay Waters Fiala, here to share in this celebration with us of naming the building after her father. His two sisters, Jean Williamson and Carolyn Craven, are also both here to share in this celebration. They, especially Gay, was very kind during those years of 1988 to 2004 to share her father with us. And he was with us constantly. Nick would show up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you'd turn around and suddenly he was there, standing in the 911 center or either out on the road with some of the responders. Based on a call, he never turned his radio off. So I'd like to give Gay the opportunity to speak to you all. Yes.
This is tough.
It's okay.
It's been 15 years, and it seems like yesterday when I come back here and be my second family. Because I can promise you that my daddy, if there was anybody he loved more than my brother and I and his family, it was his Orange County family. And they're kind of my second family too. He would have given anything to been able to beat his cancer and still be working for you guys today. But I just want to thank you so much for this consideration and this honor. And thank everybody who turned out to support him, because we all love you guys.
Yes, you can sit down. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize Jeanette Jones, who was his first deputy director. His medical director, Dr. Tom Griggs, Gwen Snowden, was one of his deputy directors, as well as Kent McKenzie and Chief Mike Tapp. All of these people served in his command staff, and all of them have many, many stories which they share with us and his entire staff. The other person I'd like to recognize is Dr. Stephen Halkiotis, and I've asked him if he would come and speak for just a moment.
I don't think I ever hugged you when you got your promotion, so let's do it right now.
Sure, no.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here this evening to speak about Nick. I remember sitting in your chair many years ago and voting on him. John Link brought him forward, and I looked at this guy. He had more hair than Willie Nelson. And I looked at him again. I said, is Link serious about this? And what I learned was we had the best EMS director in the Southeast and probably the United States. A man with a heart of gold who was on the road all the time, whether he was taking care of accidents on Highway 86, helping the Caldwell Fire Department, and leading by example through Hurricane Fran, tornadoes, and many other disasters that hit the people of Orange County. But one thing I want to say is special about Nick. Come here. In light of all the stuff going on in our country today, back in 1988, Nick Waters had a vision that women had an important role to play in EMS. And he gave women an opportunity to show they could do the job in what previously was an all-man's world. And that's what I will always remember about Nick. Because I spoke at his funeral and I heralded the work that he did. And I have to tell you, after Nick passed on, the direction of EMS also passed on, in my opinion, and went downhill. And now it's back up with this young woman right here, because she was trained by Nick Waters, and Nick gave many of the young women out here this evening the opportunity to show that what they could do in what was previously an all-male world. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would like to ask a special favor. The resolution, if we could be allowed to have Kent McKenzie, who traveled all the way from Illinois to attend this, and if we would be allowed to have him read it.
That'd be great. Do you have a copy of it, or?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you, Dinah. It's been a little over 11 years since I addressed this esteemed board as interim emergency services director. So this is a resolution naming the emergency services building the Philip Nick Waters Orange County Emergency Services Center. Whereas Colonel Philip Nick Waters served as the Orange County Emergency Management Director from 1989 to 2004, leading the divisions of Emergency Medical Services, 911 Communications, Emergency Management, and Fire Marshal Services. And whereas Colonel Waters consistently challenged the state, county, and his own department to embrace out-of-the-box thinking that moved toward creative and divergent solutions for emergency services of every discipline. In doing so, he challenged women and minorities to excel and lead in the world of emergency services. And whereas Colonel Waters established the first Fire Marshals Division to provide support to the county fire departments and community to preserve life and property through education, prevention, investigation, and fire code enforcement, and established the new Emergency Management Specialist position to provide coordination between the county, towns, school systems, and other agencies in establishing a countywide multi-hazard plan and ongoing training to improve the response given to citizens during a disaster, and to ensure consistent implementation of that plan by all agencies. And whereas Colonel Waters and staff received multiple awards from the National Association of Counties and National Association of County Commissioners for trailblazing programs and services that took a risk to change the delivery and responses of services for the better, such as Welcome to the World, Initial Response Vehicle Program, Emergency Management Comprehensive Training Program, Critical Incident Support for Responders with Dr. Peter Smith, and many others. And whereas in 1996, 2000, and 2002, Orange County experienced 3 crippling weather events in which Colonel Waters guided and directed the county to recover. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Orange County Board of Commissioners does hereby recognize Emergency Management Director Colonel Philip Nick Waters for his faith to turn dreams into reality and for having a vision for a different and better future by naming the Emergency Services Building the Philip Nick Waters Emergency Services Center, this the 12th day of December, 2017. Thank you.
Thank you. If someone would move
Move
that.
the resolution.
Second.
All right, the resolution has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say, oh, do you
If I
want to make
might
a comment?
speak to
Sure.
that, as a member of Caldwell's Fire Department, as a board member of Caldwell, and officer in that department, I remember Mr. Waters not only providing opportunity for folks and not only providing leadership, but also setting a standard that forced us and others to stretch just a little bit.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, there are none. This passes 7-0. Congratulations.
Get them all in there. Y'all should get up.
Yeah, everybody come up and get in the
Get in the
picture.
picture, all of you. Come on, all you guys back there too. Steve, you did great.
Well done.
Want us to stand back here and be in the picture too? Should we get closer together?
It says I've only got 13. Yeah, I am. It says I got 13.
1, 2, 3. Get one more. 1, 2, 3. Get it.
All right, awesome. Good job, y'all. Good job.
All right, well, that was exciting. All right. Moving on. Next up is item 6B, Amendment to Community Home Trust Affordable Housing Bond Development Agreement. The board will consider voting to approve an amendment to the Community Home Trust Affordable Housing Bond Development Agreement for the to allow for the replacement of HVAC units at the East 54 condominiums and to provide rehabilitation funding for homes purchased in the North Side neighborhood and authorize manager to sign. Cheryl Hampton, the Director of Housing, will make the presentation. Good evening, Ms. Hampton.
Good evening, Chair Dawson and all commissioners. I'm going to digress for a quick moment. When I saw Commissioner McKee at the Hillsborough meeting last night, and the mayor talked about Hillsborough as a town that's loved, that everybody comes and loves it. And I wanted you all to know that he was certainly correct. It is a friendly town. Orange County is good people. As you know, I came August 21, and the county manager asked me the other day, does it feel like home? So I can answer her, it does feel like home. And it is a community that loves and opens its door, particularly when you see things just like that and people that have worked here. So I'm proud to be a part of that. We have the amendment before you. I have two small changes that we would ask for your consideration in terms of East 54 condominiums and other properties that CHT has. We want to make sure that that's included so they can use it not only at Greenbridge, East 54 condominiums, but other applicable properties that will have HVAC units that are in need of repair. The second small change is where it says the North Side Neighborhood. It's North Side Neighborhood Initiative, because UNC has expanded for next year to be able to move into several streets in Carborough in the Pine Knoll neighborhood. I believe I have that correct. And so we would ask that you allow for those small changes to the abstract that you have before you. Background, as you see, Community Home Trust had already had these funds. They were using them. You all allowed for an amendment in 2016. So you gave permission to use $75,000 toward HVAC repairs or replacements at Greenbridge. At that time, the cost was high. Right now, in speaking with Mr. Robert Dowling, and I'm not sure he was to be here. Robert, are you? Yeah. He's right here. Can speak more if he's signed up to speak, which I believe he is. Can share that cost at Greenbridge decreased slightly, but there are other costs at the other properties, namely East 54 and several other properties that will be needing the HVAC repair systems repaired or replaced, and also to required to give additional subsidy to some of the homes that they will be purchasing and also renovating under the Northside Neighborhood Initiative. So we ask your respectful consideration of this. You have the background and all before you, and I'll stop now and see if you have any questions or anything.
All right. Are there any questions from Ms. Hampton? I will note that Mr. Dowling is signed up to speak, so if you wanted to ask those now or if you wanted to wait till after we hear from him, that's up to you.
I'll wait.
Okay. All right. Mr. Dowling?
Excuse me. Do I use this?
You have to say hello first, and then it goes on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, are you making fun of me?
Yes.
I'm kind of embarrassed to be back before you asking that you revise this money again. Some of you will recall I asked that you revise this. It was back in 2013. Because then when we found out that the Greenbridge HVAC systems were $11,000. And in 2013, Greenbridge was only 3 years old. And we didn't know where we were going to get the money to replace those systems. And I didn't know how quickly they were going to break down. And so I asked you for $5,000 per each of the 15 units, $75,000. Well, now it's 4.5 years later, and only 3 have broken down as of yesterday. Today, we learned a 4th one has to be replaced. But we learned several weeks ago that at East 54, the first system broke down, and East 54 is about 7 years old, and the system is 7,500 there. So I talked to Ms. Hampton, who's very accommodating, and about this issue and the $60,000, and her first question is, why do you still have $60,000 left from 2008 anyway? You need to spend this money. And I do. We do. And so we agreed that we could spend the money more quickly if we made the changes that are in your memo. Let us expand from just Greenbridge. The money is just now Greenbridge. We've done 3. We have 12 left. There's another one that just broke down. Expand it to East 54, and then expand it further to help us with the North Side costs. As you know, we're involved with the North Side Neighborhood Initiative. Self-help is purchasing homes, renovating them, and selling them to us, and the costs are going higher. And they're buying homes for $180,000, putting 40 into it. That's $220,000. And we can only sell them for maybe $120,000. So we're needing to identify a lot of subsidy. So Ms. Hampton asked if we could spend the monies down more quickly, and I said yes, we could if we could expand the use to help us out with Northside. As it turns out, that use that I'm asking for is consistent with the original use I asked for the money in 2008. Essentially, grants to us that provide second mortgages to reduce the prices of the homes to the buyers. So that's the whole story. I apologize to the manager, I apologize to Ms. Hampton, I apologize to you for being back here again, asking for a revision of the same money twice. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
All right, are there questions? Commissioner McKee.
Yes, Mr. Dowling, how much more is projected on the Greenbridge condominium possibility? Because given the history of those units, given the uniqueness of those units, shall we say, I don't believe that this is going to be the last. So how much more money is possible that over time is going to be needed for those units?
Well, excuse me, at Greenbridge, we have a transfer fee that the market rate owners pay to us to augment the costs of the affordable units. That transfer fee in 2013, the transfer fund was, I don't remember what it was in 2013 when I came to you all. Today, it's almost $300,000. And the dues are going up there and they're having special assessments, but we have the money there, Commissioner McKee, to take care of the HVAC systems at Greenbridge out of that transfer fee. If it's 5,000 a unit times 12 units, that's $60,000. So we can take care of Greenbridge HVAC out of a different pot of money. At East 54, we don't have that same pot of money, so therefore it would be helpful to us to move those funds over to East 54.
Given that, then why could the original request in 2016 for those units couldn't have been paid out of that pot of money that from the transfer fees at that time?
My request was 2013.
Well, yes, okay.
It was 2013, so it's four. In fact, I have the notes here of the discussion. It was March of 2013. I didn't know several things. That was 4.5 years ago. I didn't know how fast those units were going to need to be replaced. The transfer fund was much, much lower because you'll remember that Greenbridge went into bankruptcy and many units had not sold, and now all the units are sold. And the price came down. It went from $11,000 for the very first one we had to replace to the last one we had to replace was $7,000. So all those factors combined that have revealed themselves over the past 4.5 years have changed the circumstances.
Continue.
Just so that I'm very, very clear, I'm not criticizing Community Home Trust. I've been very supportive from the first day I was on this board, as you're well aware,
yes,
of Community Home Trust program, your goals, the work you're doing. I guess it comes down for me to a position of not exactly a chain of custody as I was speaking on our cash receipts, but I like things to be very clear cut. If we're allocating money to a project, i.e. Greenbridge rehab of these heating units, I get a little bit queasy when we start shifting this money around and when we start talking of spending it down quickly. I'm not going to oppose this, but you're right. There have been many changes over the years, and I would really like to see, I would have been some, and this is an accounting thing, but I would have been much happier to see this money reverted back into the account that it came from, and then a request. It's an accounting thing, but it's a clean accounting thing. It's not a shifting of funds. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to leave it there. Like I say, I'm not going to oppose this, but I do have issues with how it's being done.
And I certainly can appreciate that, and I did as well, and that's why we have a recapture clause that if these funds are not spent by 2019, that the county, they would revert back to the county and can always apply either through our home program or a more appropriate vehicle that you all have granted to us. So we spoke with him about that.
And if I might respond to that, I appreciate that. As I mentioned, it's not that I suspect or question the use of the funds. I want it to be clean because I don't want to read in the paper a misstatement. I don't want to read on social media where it's probably going to, not on this, but something is going to occur at some point in time where somebody puts something on social media that's not correct. We see that each and every day, the way that people are gathering information is not true and publishing things on social media, sometimes even works its way into the formal media. I like it to be nice and clean so there's no questions.
Thank you, and we also concur with that.
Yes, ma'am, I realize that. Thank you.
Commissioner Rich?
Yeah, just real quick, Robert, can you remind us how many units are in Greenbridge? I think you said there's 12. Can you remind us how many units are in East 54 as well?
There are 15 units in Greenbridge.
15, okay.
3 of them have had the HVAC system replaced. There are 12 that have not.
Okay.
And there are 34 units in East 54.
Oh, much more. Okay, and how many of those have been replaced?
None. This is the first one.
Okay,
So we have 34 units and $60,000.
right. And may I?
Of course.
The last question, when you originally came to us, and I think you and I talked about this before, the Greenbridge was unique in that it was built to LEED certification, so the HVAC systems were not available anymore. How have you figured that part out?
I haven't figured it out at all. The people in the building, obviously, there's many more non-affordable units in the building than affordable units. And one of the people who owns a non-affordable unit, a market rate unit, said to me the units were failing left and right, and advised me, he said, you should just replace all of your units. And I don't agree with that. I think you live with it until it breaks down, because you don't know if it's going to be 1 year or 10 years. And so that's been my philosophy, and in the notes from 2013, I said the same thing
Right.
to you all. We should wait until they break and then fix them, replace them, not fix them.
Replace them.
So the same is true at East 54. I don't know when they're going to fail, but I know they're more expensive than we had budgeted for.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Jacobs?
I have a question not necessarily related specifically to the topic of the HVAC, but to the handicapped accessibility of the units that you're being presented with. Are the ones that, we know that the ones at Greenbridge are not handicapped accessible. How about East 54?
I don't believe they are generally handicapped accessible, Commissioner, because we had to retrofit one for someone in a wheelchair.
To get in the door?
Yes.
Since you're essentially being bequeathed these units from the municipalities, can you communicate to them that it would be preferable if they do the universal design so that any of these affordable units could be inhabited by a handicapped person going forward?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, just to follow up on that, I mean, are there handicap accessible units in the building, and they're just not the ones that you all are getting? Because I think there's a fair housing issue if they're building these buildings and don't have accessible units.
I don't believe they're discriminating against us, Commissioner Dorson. I don't know all the rules, but they have to meet the codes when the building gets built.
Right.
And I remember having this discussion with the one we had to retrofit, and doors that have to be gotten through, someone in his wheelchair, it's hard to open but doors are, I think they're fire doors, are required by code, and how does someone open a heavy door? And we figured it out, we worked it out. But I don't think they're in violation of codes by not providing handicapped accessible units to us.
Right, that's what I'm not sure there's any requirement to have to provide them to you. I'm just curious as to whether they have them in the building, and maybe we could just check that out. I know there's been a lot of litigation around in Raleigh, in Wake County, where there's been a lot of new development, and many developers haven't provided any of the, required handicap accessible units. So it might just be worth something to look at as an aside. Any other comments or questions on this item? I just want to reiterate, this is money that had been allocated a long time ago. This is from an old bond, right?
Yes.
So this is this is not the housing bond that just passed in 2016.
2001.
2001 bond. And so I appreciate Commissioner McKee's points, but I also think that we ought to, this money needs to be spent, right? It's not, it's not realistic to be talking about the needs of affordable housing in our community and knowing that we still have money that we're not using. So I'm glad that this is moving forward. I'm glad that you could be used in the Northside Initiative, and so appreciate Mr. Dowling's, I appreciate both presentations, but also, Mr. Dowling, I appreciate your little tutorial on how so many of these projects there are so many different pressures on them that it's hard to predict in advance. So there was, the recession, and then the Greenbridge going into, into foreclosure, and then, and so it's important for us, as we remain, diligent about our commitment to affordable housing, to be flexible in accommodating those changes. So with that, I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded, I presume, to adopt the manager's recommendation to authorize the amendment to the Affordable Housing Development Agreement.
Correct.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up, item 6C, the Lands Legacy Action Plan for 2018 to 2020. The board will consider voting to adopt the Lands Legacy Action Plan for the years 2018 to 2020. And Mr. Stansel will make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Board. And I'll actually start, but I will turn it over after a few moments to our Land Conservation Manager, Kim Livingston. I realized earlier tonight that 18 years ago to the day, almost, I was standing at this podium as we were talking about creating a resource acquisition program to try and address saving some of the natural and cultural resource lands in the county and addressing what at that time was a 1,200-acre parkland deficit for a county of our size. And so it's interesting that, here we are tonight talking all these years later about a number of things that we've been able to accomplish, but a lot of things that remain as well. So as you noted in the materials, in April of 2000, a few months, I guess 5 or 6 months after that meeting here, the board did adopt a policy document for the Lands Legacy Program. And what you're going to see tonight, that policy document is still in place. We still use it. It still has criteria for evaluating different types of conservation lands. But really, the way the Lands Legacy Program is activated is on now a triennial basis. Every 3 years, we come back and give you a blueprint, essentially, for how we think our conservation priorities look. We get feedback from all the different advisory boards that relate into these areas, and also, in many cases, it reflects conversations that we've had in other settings as well. So throughout the Lands Legacy Program, we've completed projects in all 7 townships. That's been achieved not only by the county, but with many partners. Dozens of landowners that have been interested in conserving their land. We have purchased land in fee simple for parks and nature preserves. We have purchased a great number at this point in time, I think, of agricultural conservation easements where farmers have been able to recapitalize their farms, receive some return on their investment in the land, and expand into, in some cases, very interesting and innovative areas providing local foods. So it's a big part of the circle that conservation and the other components of life are all part of. A lot of partners, I'll just mention a few along the way: Triangle Land Conservancy, the Eno River Association we heard from earlier tonight, AWASA, Duke University, other local governments have partnered with us along the way. We've also been fortunate to work with state and federal agencies that awarded over $5 million in grants over the years to our programs for park acquisition, construction, conserving farm land and open space. So we've been able to acquire land for 8 new parks, portions or all of 20 active farms totaling 1,930 acres, about 1,500 acres of natural open space. In the Eno River, King Creek, Little River, and New Hope Creek watersheds, our priority has always been to try and work in the water supply watersheds upstream of the public water supply intake so that what we're doing is protecting water quality as well as protecting the natural and cultural resources that are most significant in their county. I think the 2001 Parks and Open Space Bond was just mentioned a moment ago. That was one of the key early funding sources for this program. Previous boards and this board have been very good about making appropriations. We've used payment in lieu funds, a number of different sources, and I mentioned about $8 million between the partner and the grant funding that we've received. And I should mention, very importantly, about $1.2 million in landowner donations have gone towards the work that we've been able to do in the Lands Legacy program. And here we have a map of the acquisitions to date. This is also in your packet if you'd like to look at it on a little larger scale. The brown areas are conservation easements, and I think the green are parks or other open space areas, nature preserves and the like. So we've been able to accomplish quite a bit in those 17 years, but as we know, there's still a number of places, significant natural areas, wildlife habitat, natural heritage sites, and others that continue to exist. And we certainly still have a long list of interested farmers who are very interested in looking at the possibility of conservation easements. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kim Livingston, our Land Conservation Manager, to finish the rest of the presentation.
Good evening. This action plan comes at a time when staff is mindful of several new developments that will affect the county's land conservation actions and decisions. A minor upturn following the Great Recession of 2008-12 has provided more conservation opportunities. However, the North Carolina General Assembly did eliminate one of the important incentives for landowners to donate conservation easements or enter into bargain sales. The North Carolina Conservation Tax Credit Program expired in December 31st, 2013. Additionally, although the state budget does include funds for land conservation, the amount of grant funds available to local governments from state trust funds has been reduced significantly. Though there are these identified shortfalls, the Board of County Commissioners approved a biennial allocation of $500,000 in the CIP for conservation easement purchases, which are expected to be leveraged with outside funds through those grant funding agencies. And lastly, the New Orange County Parks and Recreation Master Plan 2030 was completed and adopted in 2014. The plan helps guide future land legacy program acquisitions relating to parks, open space, and trails, and an emphasis on completing planned land-banked parks and expanding and enhancing nature preserves. The Land Legacy program is guided, as David Stansel said, by a 3-year action plan that sets the objectives and priorities for determining what projects to work on in that specified time frame. Like the previous action plan, this one focuses on fewer target areas, and the reason for limiting the scope of projects is to allow staff to complete one or more of the larger multi-year priority projects. Staff also plans to complete projects that were approved by the Board of County Commissioners during the previous plan period, but have yet to be closed. These include acquisitions that receive final board approval for other projects that are still being negotiated that have yet to close out. An additional ongoing priority is to make sure that all properties have boundaries marked in accordance with the department's land management policy, as well as completing management plans for the properties land banked for future public parks and preserves. And this is that focus on stewardship. Staff also plans to protect high-priority natural heritage areas contiguous with existing conservation lands, allowing low-impact recreation where feasible and suitable. And to continue collaborating with towns and other entities in acquiring land for establishing or expanding public trails or greenways identified in town plans that tie together important county-wide open spaces. The last objective is to continue to pursue state and federal grants to leverage existing county funds authorized for land acquisition, site stewardship, and park development. So in addition to these objectives, the action plan identifies 6 priorities. Most of the priority focus areas in the 2018-2020 action plan are multi-year projects repeated from previous action plans. This has often been the case in prior action plans, as many of these projects take considerable time to come to fruition. A few potential new projects are offered for the board's consideration. The first is to acquire additional priority parcels adjoining existing nature preserve lands in 7 Mile Creek, and for a trail link from Hillsborough River Walk to Cane Creek designated as the MST. Like previous plans, staff plans to prioritize the acquisition of farmland conservation easements in priority supply watersheds such as Cane Creek, Upper Eno, Back Creek, and University Lake. Additionally, staff plans to continue to pursue the acquisition of a park site in Bingham Township, and this actually is the last district in the county's park plan without a park. We do plan to continue our work with OWASA on a potential park site for that. Staff also plans to expand current efforts to protect more of the Mason Farm to Jordan Lake Wildlife Corridor connector and associated natural areas. A new priority for this plan is to pursue land protection projects that create connections between critical wildlife habitats across the land bridge between New Hope Creek and the Eno River in Orange County. And lastly, staff plans to augment current efforts to designate local landmarks for high priority historic sites, including sites on the study list for the National Registry of Historical Places. And we're hoping that by doing this, it will encourage more conservation on those priority parcels and properties. So just as a visual for you, this is the map which we included in the draft action plan that shows those priorities, yellow being the prime farmland, green being those natural areas, and blue being the Bingham Township Park, as well as the blue dotted line being that designation of the MST, and the wildlife corridor, which I spoke of, connecting the land bridge in the orange arrows. That's all I have.
All right, are there questions or comments? Commissioner Markopoulos?
So I was looking at the funding source for this, for these great works, and was reminded of Commissioner McKee's statement a few minutes ago about how things show up on social media and develop a life of their own. And next thing you know, there's all kinds of misinformation abounding. And so there's something going on around now that we're getting ready to blow $5 million that we should be using for schools, when in fact, correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, that a large majority of this money was democratically designated during the bond voting, correct?
Yes, a good, about 2.4 million of the funds track back to the 2001 Parks and Open Space Bond.
And then
that was converted later on to alternative financing, but that is the source of it.
And then you have the payment in lieu funds, which were generated by development as a fair way to generate parkland and recreational opportunities for the growing population. So it would therefore be illegal, right, for us to take that money and buy something else with it, right?
Well, the payment in lieu funds certainly can only be used by definition for park and open space land acquisition or construction. The bond funds were converted to alternative financing, so the original prohibition from the 2001 bond may no longer be in place, but that certainly was the way it was conveyed to the voters in 2001 when those funds were approved by the voters.
So it may not be illegal, but it would be highly inappropriate and duplicitous to use that money any other way, right? So I would ask that when we publicize this, that we directly address that issue and describe the funding to counteract this misunderstanding of the financing.
Okay, we can certainly do that.
Thanks.
Commissioner Price, I think you had your hand up.
Just for clarification, on page 4 of the report, and talking about under the cost of conservation, it says that Orange County, I believe this is what it's saying, that that we paid for the portion of Little River Park located in Durham County. Is that correct? I know that we've got joint agreements, in paying for certain parts when they straddle the line.
Straddles the county line.
Yeah.
Huh?
It straddles the county line.
Right.
Some of the grant funds that were approved for both sides. Yeah, there's 135 acres in Orange County and 255 acres in Durham County, and some of the grants were apportioned to the two counties, which made their own acquisition. So obviously Durham owns the Durham side and we own the Orange side. So I think that's what, I haven't found that reference. Is it, did you say it was page 4 of the report?
Yes, in attachment 1,
Oh, okay.
down at the bottom. Next to the picture.
But, sorry, I'm trying
I
to
mean,
do
it's
this.
another, it's
The
sort of.
first page of attachment 1,
I
it's
see.
numbered at the top electronically.
Just for
Yes,
clarification.
and that's just referencing the fact that the grant from the Land and Water Conservation Fund was actually jointly distributed and jointly administered. So that's,
I think it'd be
we
helpful.
might be able to word that better.
Yes, because I think, again, the wrong impression will be out there.
Yeah, we certainly have not been paying for land in Durham County.
In Durham, yes.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Thank you. I appreciate the comments of Commissioner Markopoulos and the fact that we're not taking money from anything else to do the Lands Legacy Program. And in fact, one could argue that having the money left is a sign of frugality and caution in spending the money, since it's been 16 years or since the voters approved it, and we haven't spent it all yet because we're looking for the best opportunities. There are a few things I was thinking. When we did the Little River Park, it was criticized as being too remote and nobody would go there. When we did the soccer complex, which is right in the middle of the county, that was too remote. I wonder if we could get some visitation numbers.
We can do that.
It would probably be good to incorporate them as an appendix to the Lands Legacy Program related to which facilities are now open to the public, so people can get an idea that these aren't just places that we purchased and no one's using them. My recollection was we have been pleasantly surprised at the level of usage almost immediately from when some of these facilities open. And it would be really useful, I think, information to have those numbers to track what we're doing with the Lands Legacy Program.
And those are places that we do actually have a lot of historical data on information, so we can do that.
That would be great. And I think it's also, you made the point in passing, I guess Kim did, that with the reduction in state funds and probably when the Congress does federal funds and the Farm Bill, there's less and less money available to match. And so if we have funds for easements or for purchase, and we are ready, that we can command the large amount of money that's available. One year, I think we got, was it 38% of the money
I think it may have been closer to 50%.
that the state of North Carolina had available for purchase of farmland and open space. So it's actually, it's literally an action plan in the sense that we're poised by being armed with some funds that can be applied. And then I also I wanted to report that when we had the meeting with Durham and Wake, I took the opportunity sitting in downtown Raleigh to thank Raleigh for the money it's spending to protect its watershed in northern Orange County, and to mention that to Commissioner Carter, who is there from Durham, that Durham has done nothing similar to what Raleigh is doing in Orange County, and that Little River Township especially is being protected, is downzoned to protect Durham's water supply, just like we protect Raleigh's water supply, Burlington's, Graham's, Chapel Hill's, Carborough's. And so I think there's more discussion now about how municipalities should be contributing to protecting their water supplies. And I had sent twice, when I was chair, letters to the mayor of Durham urging him to participate in purchasing conservation easements in their own watershed in Orange County. And perhaps once Mayor Schul has been in office a little while, we can do the same, because we're having these conversations about protecting the New Hope Basin, and everybody's talking about how the new thing is that governments, including Durham, are protecting their water supplies by investing money in conservation easements and land protection, but they're not our partners, certainly not the way Raleigh is.
Commissioner Rich?
I just want to follow up and make comments, two comments about what you just said. It's at the Triangle J meeting that I was at last week, they did mention of Wake's contribution to protecting the water, where. So I think that conversation is happening at the Triangle J. So if there was a letter that was to be written, we can consider using some of the meeting notes from Triangle J as well, or just using that conversation in general. As far as getting numbers of people using the parks, we talk about this a lot at the Intergovernmental Works Park Group, and we were actually surprised when Hollow Rock opened how we didn't think it was going to be very popular during like the midday or something, that like you would not think that there would be cars there, and it turned out that we were wrong, that there are people using that park all the time. So I think we have those numbers and they can easily be attached.
Most sites
to,
do.
yeah.
Other comments or questions? So I just, I just have one, I've been thinking about this, and I think maybe this is a subject for a longer discussion among the board, maybe for a work session. This is obviously a great program. It's been very successful. I have some concerns that our acquisition, particularly of parklands, has far exceeded our development of the parks. And I think that, I'd like us to really explore, how to, whether we want to, I don't want to presume everybody wants to, but about reprioritizing the development of some of these parks. I think there's nothing, I think Commissioner Markopoulos' point, and the sort of the public perceptions of what's happening, and I think it's discouraging for folks to hear that we have all this parkland that we've been buying, and there's not really anything happening on it. I mean, even if it's accessible and we have signs that say, you can walk here and things like that, some of the parks where we have planned in the master plan for more active recreation, other opportunities for playgrounds and, tennis and basketball and things like that. I just think we need to look, I would like us to look again at, sort of the priority and the rate at which we are, developing these parklands as we acquire them. I know, I live in Carrboro. When I was on the Board of Aldermen, they bought a park in Martin Luther King Park in Carrboro. That was, 2004, and there's still nothing there. Mm-hmm. And, it's great for the folks who live immediately around that area, who know it's there and walk there, but it's not really a park that people know about and can go to. And so, not to put a knock on Carrboro, I mean, that's true for all, obviously there's a different set of costs with developing and then operating, Mr. Stansel always reminds us. But I think, I'd like to see us talk about the lands legacy piece and that piece together more effectively. So we talked about agenda review, potentially having that as an item for a work session in the spring. Commissioner Burrows?
So I would encourage us to have a longer conversation about it, because I do see that pretty differently. I see parks as land banking. I think I see that as land that you can't get back and will be available to future generations. But I think about the people who set aside land where I grew up in Philadelphia in Fairmount Park, which, or Central Park, all these places. However, it really was, I think, to the benefit of future generations, and I'm okay with that, particularly given the explanation that I also gave to the schools about where we are financially. I think it's excellent we have that land, and I'm very cool for us to sit on that for a while, because it'll be there. It'll be there, and I don't know that people are, with the possible exception of Millhouse, although I haven't actually heard it, I don't think people are clamoring for those other parks to get developed. And I think Carborough is much more urban in a way, and so I can totally see why the frustration would be there. But anyway, I look forward to a longer conversation about that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. I don't think there's anything, are we asked to take any action?
Yes, I think there's a... I tried to be good and be electronic tonight, but it's
Well, let me ask you another question while we were looking for that. So are we, if this board decided that it wanted to do more, some more, and again, it's not an either or, I think, to Commissioner Burrow's point, if we decided that we wanted to prioritize developing Blackwood Farm or one of these other, parks that we have, are we permitted to use this Lands Legacy money for that? Or could we decide, we could...
I think the board could decide to use it however you see fit. And I think that we actually took steps last year in the CIP and are planning to do that again this year to try and address that. The very first recommendation in the parks plan that was adopted a couple years ago was to build the parks. And when we originally started land banking the parks, we knew that we were consciously doing that so that we would be able to save them and have them for the time when we needed them. But in some cases, I don't think we ever anticipated that Blackwood Farm Park would be 15 years in terms of land banking. We were thinking it would be more like 5 to 7, but no one anticipated the Great Recession and a lot of other things that happened, and those changed some of those timetables. And as you noted, construction costs are a little different than acquisition costs. So, but I think we're actually planning to have that sort of conversation with you as we go into the CIP.
Great. So I look back at the agenda. We are asked to, the manager's recommending that we adopt the Lands Legacy Action Plan for 2018-2020. So
and that would just be the priorities, the blueprint that's in the document.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adopt the 2018-2020 Lands Legacy Plan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Stansel. Yes.
May we ask Mr. McGee, I didn't want to say Mr. McKee, Mr. McGee to do a press release that tries to explain or clarify some of the points that were made about where the money comes from, and the fact that we're doing this is a 3-year plan. It's the preponderance of the money is essentially a carryover from a bond in 2001, et cetera. You were here.
Yeah, we'll be doing that.
All right.
We'll do that.
Is that clear? You understand what Commissioner?
Newspapers or few newspapers for people to read that will explain this, but they will put in a press release verbatim.
Put it on my Facebook feed so I can spread it around a little bit, too.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Next up, item 6D, Schools Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance, approval of membership and capacity numbers. The board will consider voting to approve the November 15, 2017 membership and capacity numbers for both school districts, Orange County and Chapel Hill Carborough, which will be used in developing 10-year student membership projections and the 2018 SAPFO Technical Advisory Committee report. Ashley Moncado will be making the presentation. I was going to say, Mr. Benedict, I think they should rename this thing the Craig Benedict Public Facilities Ordinance, because I remember when you came up with this crazy scheme, I was on the Carborough Board of Aldermen, and we all thought, this will never work. And here it is, 100 years later, and we're still doing it. So while we're in the naming mood, we might think about doing that.
Creative initials,
Yeah.
Staff is
Okay. Ms. Moncado.
Yes, good evening, thank you. As just stated, this item is for the board to receive and approve the November 15th membership and capacity numbers for the Orange County Schools and Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools. As you are all aware, this is the start of the SATFO process for us to draft the 10-year projection sheets as well as the 2018 SATFO Technical Advisory Committee report. And that usually comes back to the board in draft form in March, and then in May for final certification. I just kind of want to go through attachment 2 real quick with you all tonight. And just kind of going over the student membership numbers that were reported to us from both school districts. Chapel Hill, Carborough City Schools experienced a decrease of 45 students at the elementary school level, but an increase of 4 students at the middle school level, and an increase of 165 students at the high school level. Orange County Schools experienced a decrease of 110 students at the elementary school level, and a decrease of 1 student at the high school level, but an increase of 6 students at the middle school level. As a result of House Bill 13, which modified the average class size ratios for this school year for kindergarten to 3rd grade, both school districts experienced a decrease in school capacity at the elementary school level. Further decreases in average class size ratios are planned and possible for the 2018-19 school year based on House Bill 13. In order to prepare and plan ahead of these potential changes, the SATFO Technical Advisory Committee will meet in January to discuss capacity changes as a result of House Bill 13 and future increases in capacity from schools construction projects in the next 10 years. This meeting in January will also discuss the possible reconvening of the Joint Action Committee comprised of representatives from the Orange County Board of Commissioners and both school boards. This is similar to when the committee met in 2005 to discuss class size ratio changes at that time. So the board will reconvene at this time to possibly discuss how to address changes in the class size ratios and capacity changes for the 2018 and 19 school year and how those will be implemented for SATFO purposes. Staff is available to answer any questions and receive comments from the board, but the recommendation before you tonight is to approve the November 15th SATFO membership and capacity numbers as submitted by both school districts and contained in attachment 1.
Thank you for that very succinct presentation. Are there questions for Ms. Moncado? Any questions? I just have just one or two. So the chart that's on the last page that notes, has that asterisk with the class size ratio note.
Yes.
So that's the new ratio that's in
Correct.
effect now, and then if the bill goes through, that'll be like 1 to 17, is that right?
Correct. Right now, it is 1 to 21 currently. With tonight, it'll change to 1 to 20. And then possibly for the 2018-2019 school year, you could see a decrease to 1 to 17.
And then the other question I had, which I don't think you can answer, but we can probably just find this out. I'm just curious, the decreases in both elementary schools in the 2 districts are a little bit surprising, and my guess is that's the result of students going to charter schools?
In Orange County schools, more so, that there's probably the loss to the Expedition School, and I believe Eno River Academy. They are expanding as well as in Hillsborough. So the loss of, and we saw a decrease a couple years ago at that level that was over 100 in the Orange County school system. So that's, and Chapel Hill, Carborough City Schools, they report the same. They're losing to charter schools.
All right, thank you. Commissioner McKee.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the charter schools, because do we have any way to get information from them as to what their actual numbers are compared to their capacity and how it factors into this? Because I don't know whether a lot of people have been out on Highway 57 a mile or two north of Hillsborough and just took a look at that new facility, but it's going to be huge. It's an elementary, it's a high school, a middle school.
I thought that was our new prison.
Our new what?
Prison, that's what it looks like.
Well, I don't believe I would refer to a school as a prison, but
No,
I'll
that's what it
defer
looks
to
like.
that. But my point is, irregardless of what anyone has an opinion of charter schools, I think they're here to stay. And that school in Orange County is growing. So we had better, for our own good, try to figure out how we are going to work with the charter schools to make sure that the charter schools are not to the detriment of the public schools. And if we continue to ignore the charter schools and hope they go away, I think we're going to find ourselves in a difficult position. So that's the basis of my question as to how that factors in and whether this is being tracked.
We don't work directly with the charter schools, but we do monitor. And starting, I think, last year, we did document how many students, approximate students, that we believe are in the charter school system. I think those numbers came from possibly the school districts, but possibly also our finance department. So it is something that we are monitoring. That we do, I think last year was the first year that we actually put those numbers in the SATFL report of how many approximate students are in the charter school system in Orange County.
Thank you.
And there's a section in there as well that kind of, I think last year we got a little bit more in depth as well as to what the issue is with monitoring charter school students, because they can go across county lines.
Yep, that's going to be an interesting dynamic as we go forward.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jacobs?
I agree with Commissioner McKee, and I'd like to even go further. The current federal tax bill is going to offer scholarships and incentives to send your child to private school at the expense of the public school systems. So I actually think we should be more aggressive about reaching out to the charter schools that currently exist in Orange County and seeing what they project as their growth, instead of having the school districts tell us what the growth has been so far, so that we can plan together where they're going. Because we're funding them to a great extent anyway. And to just kind of passively get information is a little different than trying to get together with them and treat them like a little bit more of an amorphous school system. And how are we going to incorporate how they're spending public money and how they're affecting these schools and the school capacities? Because we have resolutions from both school systems questioning the reduction in class size that they both passed, I think, last night. And so they have that mandate, and it's running, in some ways, it's running parallel with the fact that more kids are going to charter schools. So it may not be as critical to have the classrooms if charter schools keep accelerating through government programs the acquisition of more and more students. It just seems like instead of seeing it as a dire situation, which is how we usually deal with school capacity issues, although SAPFO helps us in that regard, we ought to try and be able to project a parallel system that's operating in Orange County and see how that's going to affect capacity, how it's going to affect our spending, how it's going to affect the two school systems, and see if we can get a little bit more, a clearer picture.
Well, I'm all for talking to folks and trying to collaborate. I don't know that the charter schools have any, I don't know that they have any incentive to work with us, but I'm certainly open to doing that. I do think that I think whether they're here to stay or not, they present a real threat to traditional public schools, and I think just the fact that a school is publicly funded doesn't really make it a public school. But I think getting a better handle on its impact is really critical, and understanding that. I think it's a little harder to do from the charter end because they do get students from Durham and from Alamance and Chatham, and so, but certainly, doing our best to sort of get as much information as we can to more effect, to add depth, I guess, to the SAPFO, I think is a good idea. Commissioner McKee?
I agree with Chairman Dorson. They do present, the charter school system in itself does present issues for public schools, some of which are quite concerning, but this is a growing entity, for lack of a better word. If you want to see just how it affects traffic, go just to the intersection of Highway 86 and 57. It now takes about 20 minutes to come from Mars Hill Church, about a half a mile north of the school, through that intersection to Highway 70. Also, you can go over to Meadowlands Development just off of 70 where the elementary is at, and you cannot get in and out of that private drive. If we do not take them seriously, if we do not figure out a way to connect with these schools, with this program, because as Commissioner Jacobs mentioned, federal funding through grants or whatever is going to make it even more attractive. Our state legislature is working to expand it. We are doing ourselves and our voters a disservice if we do not acknowledge their existence, and more to the point, if we don't reach out in some manner to cooperate and to figure out some way to work for the betterment of all these kids.
Commissioner Price?
I would like to concur with Commissioner McKee. I think it's important to at least attempt the dialogue rather than use language that, we don't think they're going to talk to us or something like that. I know parents that are sending their children to the charter schools, and in a couple of cases, they've said, I wish the commissioners would stop bad-mouthing, I'm paraphrasing, but stop bad-mouthing the charter schools and come and talk to us. So I think it behooves us, as Commissioner McKee was saying, to at least try to, open the door and speak to people.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm all in favor of speaking to them, but I personally believe that it presents a threat to traditional public schools, and I think that charter schools, research has shown that they're more than twice as segregated as traditional public schools. The schools themselves are segregated. They have a segregating effect on the schools from which they draw students, and so, but I'm happy to. The will of the board is the will of the board, and I'm happy to talk to them, and if there's ways to do that. I think the legislature is going to be forcing our hand on that because they're going to be pushing for potentially funds for transportation and for facilities, and so I'm happy to do that. But just personally, I have a lot of concerns about the impacts.
As I think we all do.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that anybody didn't. All right, so the recommendation is that we approve the November 15th, 2017 membership and capacity numbers as submitted by each school district.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve that. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, item 6E, consideration of approval of additional station for the Durham Orange Light Rail Transit Project at Blackwell and Mangum Streets in downtown Durham. The board will consider voting to approve an additional station for the Durham Orange Light Rail Transit Project at Blackwell and Mangum Streets in downtown Durham. The Orange County Transit Plan requires the Board of Commissioners to approve the addition or elimination of any stations in the proposed system plan. This addition cannot increase the total cost of the project and must be accommodated within the current budget. Travis Mirren, Matthew Clark from Go Triangle, and Danny, are you going to speak as well? Okay. All right. We'll make a presentation.
Thank you, Chair Dorison. As you mentioned, the Orange County Transit Plan contemplates how we would process and approve the movement of stations or the addition or elimination of stations. The first category is if a station were to move along the system, and that, like we did with the Gateway Station, requires the consultation with both the Board of Orange County Commissioners and the Durham Commissioners. The second category is the one in which this falls, where we're actually adding, in this case, adding a station, or in the case of eliminating a station, either the addition or elimination has to be approved by the Orange County Board, the Durham County Board, the MPO Policy Committee, and the Go Triangle Board. So the Durham Board of Commissioners voted last night to approve this addition of a station in downtown Durham. Our board will be considering it tonight, and then both the MPO and Go Triangle Board will be considering this tomorrow. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matthew Clark to provide some information on this particular station addition. Matthew?
Thank you, Travis. As we mentioned last time, there are two main changes that we're looking at. One is the Gateway Station shift. And as Travis mentioned, that will be voted on by our board tomorrow. Since we've already talked about that change, I don't want to belabor that situation. Here is the station between Blackwell and Mangum Streets along Pettigrew near DPAC, the Durham Bulls Athletic Park, and the American Tobacco campus. And we discussed this at our last presentation as well. One of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that during the engineering phase of the project, we iron out the details of design such that we move from 30% design to near 100% design so that we're ready for the next phase, which is construction. As we iron out those details, some will cost money, some will save money. All are contained within the budget for the capital cost of the project, which is set upon entry into engineering at around $2.47 billion. So again, engineering is the phase during which we iron out the details. Some of those details cost money, some save money, and all are contained within the budget for the capital cost of the project. There are a couple questions that we received through Travis, and I want to thank Travis for helping facilitate getting those questions answered. And I wanted to go through some of those questions and the answers that we submitted to Travis. First off, where did the idea for the station come from? Well, during project development and during the drafting of our environmental impact analysis, we've received feedback from stakeholders that indicated an interest in this particular station between Blackwell and Mangum along Pettigrew at near DPAC and the Durham Bulls Athletic Park and the city center in Durham. And as a result of that feedback, we made a commitment to study the feasibility of the station during the engineering phase. At the time, the station was not feasible due to the fact that we had 3-car platforms. And the tracks need to widen before they reach the platform. There is a historic building that I call the Old Bull Building along Pettigrew Street. The widening of the tracks would have impacted that building given the 3-car platform. Our board has approved a move from 3-car to 2-car platforms, which, by the way, saves us $22 million. And that allows the tracks to widen a little bit later and miss the Old Bull Building so that there's no impact to that historic property. This change is relatively inexpensive, not just in relation to the gateway change, but in relation to other changes we've considered so far. And the reason for that is that it exists along a current area of the alignment, so no shift in the alignment is required. We're going along Pettigrew Street anyway. The station addition really just is a matter of putting the station there between Blackwell and Mangum along Pettigrew. And I wanted to reiterate also that engineering updates will be submitted to the FTA for reevaluation. So when you all vote tonight, if you vote to approve this station, when our board votes tomorrow, if they vote to approve this station, all of these changes during the engineering phase have to be submitted to the FTA for reevaluation. And we may be required to do further environmental analysis, for instance. And so I wanted to make sure that you all know that if supplemental environmental analysis is required by the FTA, Go Triangle will work with the FTA to complete that analysis prior to an amended record of decision. And that record of decision is ultimately what defines the project. At that point, I'll take your questions.
All right, questions on this? Commissioner Jacobs, Commissioner Markopoulos?
Is the building that you're calling the Bull Building the Blackwell factory?
I call it the Old Bull Building. Right now, there are some apartments there. I know there's a long waiting list because I looked at them, but it's right there on the corner of, actually I've got a map.
Pettigrew and Blackwell?
Yep.
It has a
So
name.
it's
a
up there on your-
It's a historic building called the Blackwell Factory.
Okay, well, I call it the old bull building just because that's what a lot of my friends in Durham call it, but it's right there if you see on your screen. And again, you can see how the tracks kind of have to widen before they get to the station.
I was just going to point out to the board that whatever the board decides is how I'll vote tomorrow.
Commissioner Markopoulos?
So I'm curious about the different expenditure changes, and basically what you're saying is there's various expenditure changes, and to date, they're all contained within the budget?
Well, it's not just that to date, they're all contained within the budget. And I want to stress that the budget is set, and that's the budget for the capital cost of the project. It's set upon entry into engineering at roughly $2.47 billion. So any of those details, I call it engineering the phase during which we iron out the details, any of those details, they've all got to be contained within that budget.
Okay, so that gets to my major part of my question. So there's a 30% contingency, right?
It's I believe so, yes, and it's about roughly $500 million.
Okay, so that is there to absorb, I would presume, absorb changes that are below that 30%, right? I mean, that you can say that the contingency funds are covering these costs, and that would be another way of saying they're contained within the budget. You know what I'm saying? I'm just asking, so when do you break into the contingency? Because we all hope that some of that contingency remains at the end.
Sure, and we at Go Triangle are actively tracking all of these changes to make sure that the ones that cost money are offset by the ones that save money, because we don't want to eat into that contingency.
Right. And so is there a point in time where you can say you're 1% into the contingency, or you're not near the contingency? Are you tracking?
Yes.
that
So
stuff?
FTA requires us to track that, and we have a program management oversight consultant that's assigned to us by the FTA that checks in with us every month, and they've been very active, and they require that tracking. I can go through the changes that we've done so far. Two-car platform saves $22 million. There was a Patterson Place change that cost about $4 million. Gateway is roughly $8 million. There was a change at University Drive that I believe saved around $9 million. And then there's the addition of the Blackwell Mangum Station, which adds about $2.5 million.
So would it be possible for us to be periodically apprised of where we are in relation to the
Absolutely,
contingency?
absolutely. And, we have agreed to quarterly updates. Our next quarterly update will come probably sometime the end of January, early February. And during that point, we will update you on a whole lot of stuff, but including that. But at this point, we are carefully monitoring our expenditures and our savings, and we're required to do so by the FTA.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Commissioner McKee?
Given my history on light rail, I'm probably going to shock you by saying thank you. This additional station, for me, is beneficial for service. It's a recognition that service to a downtown urban area is critical. Outside of the service to the two universities, this downtown service for me is a major factor of what, if this comes to fruition, will make it work. Without these stops that are providing access to critical areas, I don't think that you'll have the ridership. But the addition here, I applaud you for.
I appreciate that, and that's why we anticipate an approximate net increase in ridership, it's on this screen here, of about 600 trips per day. So I appreciate that, Commissioner McKee.
Other questions or comments? I just want to echo what Commissioner McKee said. I think, I thought the same thing, that this, being able to add this, not only does it add 600 trips, but it also, it adds evening destination, so you also have ridership spread out. So instead of just having people getting to and from work, let's say, or that being the predominant, that you have people going for nighttime destinations. So I think that's really laudable, and I just want to echo that sentiment. And then I just want to make clear, just to follow up on Commissioner Markopoulos's point. So just from the numbers you gave, it sounded like, and maybe you could provide, it sounds like so far there's been about 31 million in savings from the two-car and from the University Place, and these changes that we've talked about, 2.5 million for this station, 8 for Gateway, and then I think you said 4 for Patterson Place.
Patterson Place.
So that's about 14.5, 15. So we have a net so far, a net saving. I mean, there may be other smaller things, but roughly a net savings of about 15 million.
That sounds about right, but I'll make the point, just as I did with Commissioner Markopoulos's question, that as we move through the engineering phase, as we move from 30% to 100% design, we'll be ironing out the details, and we'll be carefully tracking the cost and savings of all of those details, and we're required to do so by the FTA. Everything, no matter what it is, must be contained within the budget for the project. So as we come back in the future and report back to you, I think it's really important to keep in mind that not only that we're tracking all of this and that we're required to do so, but that it's contained in the budget for the
Yeah, well, I
capital.
appreciate that. I just think it's even more significant that these changes that have been made so far, at least right now, have yielded a net savings and have added a station that we think is particularly valuable. So I appreciate that overall reporting and all of that, but I just wanted to point that out. At least that's where we are right now, so. Did you want to add something?
Well, yes, anybody going back to my comment about the traffic with the charter schools, if anyone wants to get a feel of how it possibly could make a change, go downtown in that area on a ball game night. So this, since we have Orange County folks going to the ball games and going to DPAC and going to this area, this one will make a difference.
I think that's an excellent point, and it speaks to the regional value of this light rail. And it's not just folks from Orange County going to the ball game, it's folks from Wake County too. I mean, this project really is one with regional appeal and regional value. And the FTA has recognized that, which is why they've ushered us into the engineering phase.
All right, then, the manager's recommendation is that the board consider approving the addition of a station at Blackwell and Mangum Streets in downtown Durham.
I'll move that we approve that station.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
So I am so directed.
You are so directed. Yes. All right. That concludes the regular agenda. There are no reports tonight, so that brings us to the consent agenda. Item 8. Are there any items that folks wish to remove from the consent agenda?
No, let's go.
If not, then I'll entertain a motion.
It's consent agenda.
Second.
Motion has been made by Commissioner McKee and seconded by Commissioner Rich to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Consent agenda is passed unanimously. Item 9, County Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This evening, I just would like to point out the 2 information items, the Mountains to Sea Trail and also Blackwood Farm Park, the status on the progress on that park. And one note I would point out as well is Commissioner Jacobs had a concern about some mowing equipment that we were going to purchase. We have looked into how we will maintain those fields, and we are looking at hay management of those fields, and that's included in that. Also, I would like to just, you have at your places a current progress on the Rogers Road sewer project, neighborhood sewer project. The construction started, as you know, in September. We had the groundbreaking, and you all attended. Right now, about 2,400 feet of sewer pipe has been installed, about 13% of the 19,000 feet of the pipe that will be installed. Rock and utility coordination have slowed some areas of work, but we're making progress, and we're on time and on budget. They expect to bring in 2 crews in January of 2018, Muffet Pipe Incorporated, and there is project status and other information that will be periodically provided to the public, but one of the things that I will be doing on some of our larger projects is I will be reporting through the county manager's report at these meetings so that we will keep you informed. If you do have any questions during the process, don't hesitate to contact me, and I will get information for you on those projects. And of course, the project completion is still on time of summer of 2018.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Sure.
The summer of 2018 date, does that refer to people's houses being connected or just to the mains and everything else being laid in the ground?
This is the mains being laid in the ground, but as the construction is completed, there will be access for houses to be completed as the lines are put in.
Great.
Madam Manager, did you mention Moffett Pipe would be doing this work?
Yes.
I will speak to Moffett Pipe. I have worked with them, and they're an excellent company. I think it'll come in on time and on budget.
Yeah, great, thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you. County Attorney's Report. All right, so that brings us to item 11, appointments. We have several appointments on the agenda. The first up, item 11A, is appointment to the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. Commissioner McKee.
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Ms. Eleanor Kennard for this position, too. I've worked with former Senator Kennard on several issues with housing, affordable housing, in our housing department, and she's been a tireless advocate for those folks.
Second.
All right, that motion has been made and seconded to appoint Ellie Kennard for slot number 2. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. There is one vacancy remaining on that board. Are there any other nominations that folks want to make at this time?
So any one of these people could be an at-large representative.
Yes, at-large means anybody.
Yes.
If they're at large, we just ain't called them yet. If they're at large, we just haven't called them yet.
Yeah. All right, if there's, I mean, we could revisit this if there's no other nominations. You know, if people want to look at that further and make a nomination for next time, we could bring that back. Otherwise.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ms. Hampton, are you interviewing people at this time for this position?
We have several upcoming, so we have not started to put out a notice yet. We have, the board met in November and have talked among themselves. I have not received any names back, but there will be several other folks rolling off given attendance or non-attendance, and we would bring that back to you between January and February.
Thank you.
Commissioner Markopoulos?
So there's currently a lot of in attendance going on right now?
We have several folks that have conflicts, yes. And they have not, not had the opportunity to attend, yes.
So it might help if we added a person now, rather than not, to at least have more people involved, right?
At your pleasure, sir, yes.
Well, I would nominate Phil Venable, who actually is now a Chapel Hill Township. His road address is correct, but he's no longer in Cheeks. Township, Chapel Hill, but
He
anyway, I'd
also
nominate him.
He also serves on our
We just
public housing board.
We just appointed him to a
I'm
board
sorry, I'm saying public
last meeting,
housing, but
didn't
Section 8, our Housing Authority Board.
Is that an undesirable conflict in any way? Or?
I don't, where is our county attorney? I don't know. I don't think it is.
I don't think it would be illegal or anything, but just.
The boards have asked to meet in joint meetings, so I plan to bring the advisory boards that are around affordable housing together in 2018.
Actually, I remember when I was on the Housing Authority, there were a few members that were also on this board as well, which seemed to be a good fit.
Well, I'm generally in favor of, if there's someone who's not on any boards, of appointing someone who's not on any boards.
Right.
But if you'd like to make a nomination, of course, you can certainly do that.
Well, I'm open if there's another person who's not on any boards that someone thinks would serve well. I just happen to know he'd do a pretty good job.
Well, the reason I'd ask the question is that if the committee is looking at people to invite to the board, I'd just as soon let them come to us with a recommendation.
They will not be meeting in December, but can certainly bring back recommendations if they have any to you in January.
All right, why don't we wait till January, and then whatever, we can fill this seat and whatever other ones we become vacant at that time.
Thank you.
All right, item 11B is the Carborough Northern Transition Area Advisory Committee.
Mr. Chair, I'll nominate Deborah Eberich for position number 3.
Any relation?
Nope.
I'll second, but I do want to say that I think we need to develop a little more clarity about what this board's role is. They're not sure if who they're advising. They don't feel, the members I've spoken with don't feel like when they advise Carborough considers it to be appropriate.
True.
But they think that that's part of their role, and also to advise us. So I think when we have conversations, which we had discussed with Carborough about areas of joint planning interest, that should be part of the discussion.
Question?
Yes?
Do we have the charge for this committee? Could we get a copy of that?
We could get you the bylaws.
So that might be good to get the
Sure.
bylaws of charge.
They're not under our jurisdiction, they're under Carver's.
So, yeah.
I can send to you by email.
That'd be great.
And we'll make a note of it for whenever our meeting with Carborough is rescheduled, we'll
Good.
put this on the agenda. I think it'll be coming up as part of a work session in the spring.
Great.
All right, so the motion has been made and seconded for Deborah Eker-Rich for position 3. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Next up is the Orange County Visitors Bureau. There are several slots being advertised or being proffered.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Rosemary Waldorf for position.
Commissioner Rich.
Thank you, for position 2. David Brooks for position 3, and Anthony Carey for position 5.
And what about the other 2 nominees?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I forgot to, yes, number 10, Jeff Strickler, and number 12, Tim Hope.
Second.
All right, motion has been made and
Apologize.
seconded.
You threw me off my game.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Next up is the Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee, and
Before we move on to that,
Oh, yeah.
another instance where there's a position open and people available to fill it.
Well, do you want to nominate someone?
I mean, is it,
The Visitors Bureau is actually interviewing people now for that position.
curious why
Yeah.
that would happen? Yeah.
I mean, we certainly could nominate someone, but I know that they're going through the process.
Okay. All right.
All right. Next up is the 11D is the Nursing Home Advisory Committee. And I'll just remind the board that this is a committee that the folks who seek to serve have to complete a state-mandated one-year training period, so this is one where we could not do what you're suggesting, Commissioner Markopoulos, because, we could, but they would be back at starting the training period, not serving on the board.
I'll nominate Jacqueline Podger for position 7 and Dr. Carol Kelly for position 11.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded for Jacqueline Podger for position 7, Dr. Carol Kelly for position 11. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes 7-0. And then, last but not least, the Orange County Planning Board. This is one where the board does not make recommendations, so it really is absolutely within the jurisdiction of the commissioners. There are two vacancies. One is a designated Cedar Grove Township, and one is designated at-large. Commissioner McKee?
For the Cedar Grove Township position number 1, I'll nominate Adam Beeman.
Okay.
In fact, I think he's the only one that's qualified for that right now.
He is.
That is right.
And I'd like to nominate someone for the at-large.
Okay.
Hunter Spitzer, who's from Hillsborough Township and is a student studying city and regional planning.
All right, Commissioner Rich?
And I'd like to nominate Scott Radway for position number 7.
Okay, so far, none of these nominations have been seconded, so, yeah, I just want to say, so let's go back to Commissioner McKee's nomination.
Okay, Mr. Beeman.
For Mr. Beeman for the Cedar Grove seat. That's been seconded. He's the only one eligible for that seat, so let's go ahead and vote on that one first. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, so that passes 7-0. Now, there's been a nomination for Hunter
Spitzer.
What a name.
It's a great name.
I'll second that nomination.
And let me also say, we already have 3 people from Chapel Hill Township on the planning board. Nothing that the planning board does affects them in any direct way. To keep adding, I'm friends with Mr. Radway, but I think we have enough Chapel Hill people on the board.
And just to reiterate, he does not live in Chapel Hill. He lives in the county. It says he has a Chapel Hill address.
Okay, so Mr. Spitzer's nomination has been made and seconded. Is there a second for Commissioner Rich's motion for Scott Radway? Okay, so that nomination dies for lack of a second. All those in favor of Mr. Spitzer, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those
Sorry.
opposed? Okay, so Mr. Spitzer is appointed to the at-large seat.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment that, since we've got that out of the way?
Yes.
I will speak for myself rather than the board, but I have an absolute expectation that anyone sitting on the Orange County Planning Board or any other appointed board, but particularly Orange County Planning Board, take the time and make the effort to read the abstracts. We have to read the abstracts or we look like fools sitting up here, and it's obvious when you don't read the abstracts.
I think
It bothered me greatly in an item that came to us in which there was a comment that a person had not either had or taken the time to read their abstract. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, well, we'll ask Ms. Baker to convey that to all the members of our advisory
All of
boards.
them. Now, I don't want to pick on any one person, but that is bothersome.
All right, we have come to the end of our regular agenda, and we have an item to discuss in closed session. So I need a motion from the board to go into closed session to discuss the county's position and to instruct the county manager and county attorney on the negotiating position regarding the terms of a contract to purchase real property pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A5.
So
During
moved.
the meeting.
And to approve this closed session minutes. So that's
So moved.
so moved by Commissioner Burrows. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All right, all those in favor, say aye. 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 All right, we're going into closed session.
Vote with your feet, people, so we can get out of here.
It's only 3%.